Did you know that Rick Sanchez, the seemingly uncaring scientist, has a hidden soft spot? In the early episodes, we see Rick as a selfish, alcoholic genius who cares about nothing but his own pursuits. But as we journey through the multiverse with him, we start to notice subtle changes in his behavior. From small gestures like saving Morty from dangerous situations to grand sacrifices like erasing everyone's memories to protect his family, Rick's character arc is a roller coaster of emotions. This video explores the gradual transformation of Rick from a cynical scientist to a caring grandfather, revealing the complex layers of one of animation's most intriguing characters. When we first meet Rick Sanchez in the early episodes of Rick and Morty, he's not exactly the lovable grandpa you'd want to invite over for family game night. In fact, he's pretty much the opposite. Rick bursts onto the scene as a selfish, alcoholic genius who seems to care about nothing but his own wild pursuits. It's like he's on a mission to prove that family is overrated and science is the only thing that matters. We see Rick dragging poor Morty on one dangerous adventure after another, and it's clear he doesn't give a flying interdimensional flip about his grandson's safety. It's all about the thrill of discovery and the rush of scientific breakthroughs for Rick. He's got this cynical worldview that's just impossible to ignore. Every chance he gets, Rick's belittling Morty and dismissing the importance of family like it's his job. One of the most noticeable things about Rick in these early episodes is his ever-present flask. This guy's drinking habit is front and center, and we often see him taking swigs during the most intense situations. It's like he's using alcohol as a shield against the chaos of his own life, which is pretty ironic, considering he's usually the one causing all the chaos in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong, Rick's scientific genius is established right from the get-go. The guy's mind is like a supercomputer on steroids. But here's the kicker. He mostly uses all that brain power for his own amusement. It's like he's got this incredible gift, but instead of curing diseases or solving world hunger, he's more interested in creating wacky gadgets and messing with the fabric of reality just because he can. As we watch these early episodes, we start to get little glimpses into Rick's past through his offhand comments. It's clear this guy's got a troubled history, but he's not exactly the type to sit down and have a heart-to-heart about his feelings. Instead, we get these little breadcrumbs that hint at a life filled with adventure, loss, and probably a whole lot of running away from his problems. But here's where things get interesting. Despite Rick's apparent disregard for others, there are these tiny moments where we see flashes of genuine care. They're quick, and if you blink, you might miss them, but they're there. It's like for a split second the mask slips, and we see that maybe, just maybe, there's more to Rick than meets the eye. These early episodes are crucial because they set the stage for Rick's eventual growth. We're seeing the starting point of his character arc, and let me tell you, he's got a long way to go. It's like the writers are saying, okay, here's this brilliant but deeply flawed guy. Now watch as we slowly chip away at his cynical exterior. As we move forward in the series, we'll start to see how Rick's interactions with his family begin to change him. It's a slow process, and there are definitely setbacks along the way, but it's fascinating to watch. We'll see moments where Rick's forced to confront the consequences of his actions, and slowly but surely, he starts to realize that maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than science and selfishness. One of the things that made Rick such a hit with fans early on was his dark humor and intelligence. People were drawn to his complexity, even as they recognized his many flaws. It's like we couldn't help but be fascinated by this guy, who seemed to have all the answers but couldn't figure out how to be happy. Now, let's shift our focus to the other half of this cosmic duo. Morty Smith, Rick's perpetually nervous grandson. At first glance, Morty seems like an odd choice for a sidekick. He's not exactly the brightest bulb in the multiverse, and he's certainly not equipped to handle the chaos that comes with interdimensional travel. So why does Rick, a genius who can do practically anything, constantly drag this awkward teenager along on his dangerous adventures? Well, it turns out there's a method to Rick's madness, and it's not as heartwarming as you might hope. Rick explains that Morty's brainwaves actually camouflage his own. This revelation sheds some light on the true nature of their relationship, at least in the beginning. It's not about bonding or mentorship, it's about Rick using Morty as a human cloaking device. This tidbit really drives home just how self-centered Rick can be. willing to put his own grandson in harm's way just to avoid detection. When we first meet Morty, he's this timid, easily manipulated kid who's constantly overwhelmed by the insanity of Rick's adventures. We see him stumbling through alien landscapes, fumbling with advanced technology, and generally just trying not to die. It's like watching a kitten try to navigate a minefield. Kind of adorable, but also incredibly stressful. Rick doesn't make things any easier for Morty. His treatment of his grandson is often harsh, to say the least. He's constantly berating Morty, dismissing his concerns, and throwing him into life-threatening situations without a second thought. It's a pattern of emotional neglect that Morty has to navigate on top of all the physical dangers they face. But here's where things get interesting. Despite all the danger and abuse, we start to see Morty grow. He begins to show signs of adapting to this crazy new life. There are moments where Morty displays surprising bravery, standing up to interdimensional threats, and even occasionally outsmarting Rick. It's like watching a flower grow through concrete, slow, difficult, but undeniably impressive. This growth doesn't go unnoticed, even by Rick. As the series progresses, we start to see subtle hints that Rick might actually care about Morty's well-being. These moments are few and far between, but they're there if you look closely. Maybe it's a quick glance of concern when Morty's in danger, or a rare moment of praise when Morty does something right. It's not much, but in Rick's world, even these small gestures speak volumes. The dynamic between Rick and Morty is really the heart of the show. It's a complex relationship that explores themes of dependency, manipulation, and the struggle for autonomy. On one hand, we have Rick, this brilliant but deeply damaged individual who uses and abuses those around him. On the other, we have Morty, who's struggling to find his own identity while constantly being pulled into Rick's orbit. What's fascinating is how this relationship starts to change both characters over time. Morty's influence on Rick is gradual but noticeable. There are moments where Rick actually stops to consider Morty's feelings or well-being, something that would have been unthinkable in the early episodes. It's like watching a glacier melt, slow, but with the potential for massive change. As for Morty, well, he's not just along for the ride anymore. He starts to develop his own agency, making decisions and taking actions that sometimes surprise even Rick. Is that a testament to the show's writing that they've managed to evolve this character from a simple sidekick to a complex individual in his own right? When Rick Sanchez crash-landed back into the Smith family's life, he didn't exactly come bearing gifts and warm hugs. No, Rick's return was more like dropping a scientific chaos bomb right in the middle of their suburban existence. Let's take a closer look at how Rick's presence shook up the family dynamics when he first moved in. First off, we've got Jerry Smith, Morty's dad, and Beth's husband. Poor Jerry was already struggling to keep his head above water in terms of his career and self-esteem. Then suddenly, his father-in-law shows up out of nowhere, and he's not just any old grandpa. He's a dimension-hopping super genius who can create mind-blowing inventions out of scraps he finds in the garage. Talk about feeling inadequate. Jerry tries his best to assert himself as the man of the house, but let's be real. It's hard to compete with someone who can turn a toaster into an interdimensional portal gun. Then there's Beth, Rick's daughter. She's got some serious daddy issues going on, and who can blame her? Rick abandoned her when she was a kid, and now he's back like nothing ever happened. But instead of being angry, Beth is desperate for her father's approval. She's so happy to have him back that she's willing to overlook all of his flaws and destructive behavior. It's actually kind of heartbreaking to watch. Beth will defend Rick's actions no matter how outrageous they are, all in the hope of keeping him around this time. Summer, Morty's older sister, has a different set of problems when it comes to Rick. At first, she's totally left out of the whole grandpa's crazy adventures thing. Rick is all about taking Morty on these wild, interdimensional trips, and Summer's just stuck at home dealing with normal teenage stuff. It really highlights how selective Rick's attention is. He's not interested in being a typical grandpa who treats all his grandkids equally. Nope, he's got his favorite, Morty, and that's that. Now, let's talk about how Rick treats family traditions and normal activities. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. Rick has absolutely zero interest in participating in anything that resembles a normal family life. Family game night? Boring. Thanksgiving dinner? A waste of time. Rick would rather be off exploring alternate dimensions or fighting intergalactic dictators than sit down for a quiet family meal. This constant disregard for family bonding is a huge source of conflict in the Smith household. But here's where things get interesting. Even though Rick acts like he couldn't care less about family stuff, we start to see these tiny moments where he reluctantly participates in family events. Maybe he'll stick around for dinner instead of immediately jetting off to another dimension. Or he might actually listen to one of Morty's problems without immediately dismissing it as stupid. These moments are rare, but they're there, and they hint at something deeper going on with Rick. These small instances of Rick engaging with his family are actually super important. They show us that even though Rick puts up this front of not caring about anyone but himself, there's a part of him that's capable of change and connection. It's like seeing a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the real Rick hiding underneath all that cynicism and alcohol. Rick's initial treatment of his family when he first moves in is actually crucial to understanding his character development throughout the series. It sets a baseline for how terrible he can be, which makes his eventual growth all the more impactful. We see him at his worst: selfish, dismissive, and completely uninterested in being part of a family unit. But by establishing this low point, the show gives Rick room to evolve and change over time. Rick's ability to traverse infinite realities isn't just a cool sci-fi gimmick. It's a fundamental aspect of his character that shapes his worldview and relationships. The multiverse serves as Rick's personal playground, a vast cosmic sandbox where he can indulge his every whim and desire. At first glance, this seems like the ultimate freedom. Rick can hop between dimensions, exploiting different realities for his own gain without a second thought. Need some mega seeds? There's probably a dimension where they grow on trees. Accidentally turn everyone into Cronenbergs? No problem. Just slide into a reality where you didn't screw up. But this apparent freedom comes at a cost. The concept of infinite realities reinforces Rick's nihilistic worldview. When nothing has lasting consequences, it's easy to fall into a mindset where nothing truly matters. We see this play out in Rick's cavalier attitude towards danger and his disregard for the lives of alternate versions of himself and his family. In one episode, we watch Rick casually bury the body of an alternate version of himself, treating it as just another Tuesday. Rick frequently uses interdimensional travel as an escape hatch from emotional situations or responsibilities. Whenever things get too heavy or he's confronted with the consequences of his actions, Rick can simply zip away to another reality where those problems don't exist. This pattern of avoidance becomes a defining trait of Rick's character, highlighting his inability to deal with emotional complexity or take responsibility for his actions. As the series progresses, we start to see the toll this lifestyle takes on Rick. The endless possibilities of the multiverse, rather than bringing fulfillment, seem to fuel a deeper emptiness within him. It's like having access to infinite TV channels but never finding anything worth watching. This cosmic ennui manifests in Rick's increasing reliance on alcohol and his moments of existential despair. The existence of infinite Ricks and Mortys introduces complex questions about identity and uniqueness. If there are infinite versions of you, what makes you special? This concept seems to feed into Rick's self-loathing and inability to form meaningful connections. We see this played out in his interactions with the Council of Ricks, where his disdain for other versions of himself is palpable. It's as if seeing alternate versions of himself only reinforces Rick's worst opinions about himself. Rick's attitude towards other Ricks often reveals his deep-seated insecurities. He's quick to dismiss them as inferior or less intelligent, but this bravado feels like a defense mechanism. It's as if by putting down other versions of himself, Rick is trying to convince himself of his own superiority. This struggle with self-worth becomes even more apparent in episodes where Rick is forced to confront versions of himself that he perceives as more successful or happier. The introduction of Rick Prime adds another layer of complexity to Rick's relationship with the multiverse. Rick Prime embodies Rick's past traumas and motivations, serving as a dark mirror that reflects the parts of himself that Rick tries to bury. This character allows the show to explore how Rick's experiences have shaped him, and how he grapples with the consequences of his choices across multiple realities. Despite Rick's attempts to use the multiverse as an emotional buffer, it occasionally forces him to confront his vulnerabilities. In episodes where Rick faces the consequences of his actions across different realities, we see cracks in his cynical armor. These moments of forced introspection provide some of the most poignant character development for Rick, showing that even with infinite realities at his fingertips, he can't outrun his own demons forever. Just when we think we've got Rick figured out, the show throws us a curveball that changes everything. What could possibly break through Rick's seemingly impenetrable emotional walls? The answer comes in the form of Unity, a hive-mind ex-lover who pushes Rick to his emotional limits. Their reunion sets the stage for one of the most shocking and vulnerable moments in Rick's character arc. At first glance, Rick's encounter with Unity seems like just another one of his selfish pursuits. We see him indulging in all sorts of hedonistic behavior, using Unity's ability to control entire populations to fulfill his wildest fantasies. Rick appears to be having the time of his life, partying and living out elaborate scenarios without a care in the world. It's easy to dismiss this as just another example of Rick's disregard for others and his endless pursuit of pleasure. But as the episode progresses, we start to see cracks in Rick's facade. There's something different about his interactions with Unity, a depth that we haven't seen before in his relationships. Unity isn't just another conquest or a means to an end for Rick. She's actually able to challenge him intellectually and keep up with his desires in a way that no one else can. This reveals a side of Rick that we've never seen before, a side that craves genuine connection and understanding. We start to realize that Unity represents something Rick has been searching for across the infinite realities of the multiverse. She's not just a hive mind that can cater to his every whim. She's a being that can truly understand and match him on every level. This is what Rick truly seeks in a relationship, and it's both fascinating and heartbreaking to watch it unfold. As the episode progresses, we see Rick becoming more and more invested in his time with Unity. He's not just using her for his own amusement. He's opening up and showing vulnerability in a way that's completely new for his character. We see glimpses of genuine happiness and contentment that we've never seen from Rick before. It's a stark contrast to his usual cynical and detached demeanor. But of course, this is Rick and Morty, and things can't stay happy for long. When Unity ultimately decides to leave Rick, we witness something truly unprecedented. Rick experiencing genuine, raw emotional pain. This isn't the kind of minor annoyance or frustration we've seen from Rick before. This is deep, soul-crushing heartbreak, and it's a shock to see the normally unflappable Rick so completely devastated. The aftermath of Unity's departure leads to one of the most shocking and poignant moments in the entire series. Rick, in his despair, attempts suicide. It's a moment that hits like a punch to the gut, forcing us to completely reevaluate everything we thought we knew about Rick's character. This isn't the uncaring, nihilistic Rick we're used to. This is a man who's capable of feeling love so deeply that its loss drives him to the brink of self-destruction. This episode marks a crucial turning point in our understanding of Rick's emotional capacity. We've seen hints of his vulnerability before, but never anything this raw and unfiltered. It's a moment that changes how we view Rick going forward, adding layers of complexity to his character that we never knew existed. Critics and fans alike have noted the significance of this episode in Rick's overall character arc. It reveals the depth of his loneliness and his capacity for love, which stands in stark contrast to his usual cynical demeanor. This newfound understanding of Rick's emotional depth adds a whole new dimension to his character, making him more relatable and human than ever before. The impact of Rick's experience with Unity doesn't end with this episode. It serves as a lens through which we can examine his interactions with his family members going forward. Now that we've seen this side of Rick, we start to notice more subtle moments of vulnerability in his relationships with Morty, Beth, and the rest of the Smith family. It's as if the shell has been cracked, and we can't unsee the softer side of Rick that lies beneath. Ever wonder what happens when you put infinite versions of Rick in one place? Well, that's exactly what we get with the Citadel of Ricks. This fascinating concept introduces us to a society made up entirely of Ricks and Mortys from across the multiverse. It's a place that really pushes Rick's character development in new and unexpected directions. When we first encounter the Citadel, we're immediately struck by Rick's obvious disdain for the other versions of himself. It's pretty clear that our Rick sees these alternate Ricks as inferior, or as reflections of his own flaws. This reaction gives us a deeper look into Rick's self-loathing and the complexity of his character. It's like holding up a mirror to Rick and forcing him to confront all the parts of himself that he'd rather ignore. One of the most interesting aspects of the Citadel is how it challenges Rick's sense of uniqueness. We've always known Rick as this one-of-a-kind super genius, but suddenly we're faced with the fact that there are countless other Ricks who share similar traits and capabilities. This raises some pretty big questions about the nature of Rick's intelligence and what really sets our Rick apart from the rest. We see Rick's individualism and rejection of authority on full display in how he refuses to conform to the norms of the Citadel. He's always been a rebel, but here we see him actively fighting against a system made up of versions of himself. It's a powerful statement about Rick's desire to maintain his unique identity, even when surrounded by beings who are essentially him. As the series progresses, the Citadel becomes a recurring element that really challenges Rick's worldview. It forces him to grapple with the implications of his actions and their impact on the multiverse. We start to see that Rick's choices don't just affect his immediate family or dimension, but they have consequences that ripple out across infinite realities. The Citadel serves as this complex backdrop for Rick's ongoing identity struggles. It illustrates the tension between his genius and his emotional shortcomings in a way that we haven't seen before. On one hand, we have this society that showcases the incredible potential of Rick's intellect. But on the other hand, we see how that same intellect can lead to isolation, conflict, and a deep-seated dissatisfaction with oneself. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Citadel is how it evolves over time. It's not just a static place that Rick visits once and forgets about. Instead, it becomes this recurring element in the series that grows and changes, much like Rick himself. We see power struggles, political intrigue, and even rebellion within the Citadel, all of which reflect different aspects of Rick's personality and the choices he's made. The Citadel also gives us a unique opportunity to explore different versions of Rick. We see Ricks who have embraced conformity, Ricks who have rejected their scientific pursuits, and even Ricks who have found a way to live peacefully with their families. Each of these alternate Ricks serves as a what-if scenario for our Rick, showing us the paths he could have taken and the person he could have become under different circumstances. Perhaps one of the most impactful aspects of the Citadel is how it affects Rick's relationship with Morty. Seeing countless pairs of Ricks and Mortys working together, or sometimes against each other, adds new layers to the dynamic between our main characters. It raises questions about the nature of their bond and whether it's truly unique or just another constant across the multiverse. The Citadel of Ricks isn't just a cool sci-fi concept. It's a powerful tool for character development. It forces Rick to confront his own nature in ways that no other adventure could. By putting Rick face to face with infinite versions of himself, the show creates opportunities for introspection, growth, and change that drive Rick's character arc forward in meaningful ways. Not just when you think you've seen Rick at his most outrageous, he goes and turns himself into a pickle. But this isn't just another one of Rick's wild experiments. It's a clever metaphor for his deepest fears and insecurities. The Pickle Rick episode takes Rick's self-destructive tendencies to a whole new level, revealing a side of his character that's both hilarious and deeply troubling. We see Rick go to extreme lengths to avoid attending family therapy, and I mean extreme. He literally transforms himself into a pickle just to get out of it. This isn't just Rick being his usual quirky self. It's a clear sign of how much he desperately wants to avoid confronting his emotional issues. It's like he'd rather face certain death as a pickle than spend an hour talking about his feelings with his family. As Pickle Rick fights for survival, we get to see Rick's incredible intelligence and resourcefulness in action. He manages to craft makeshift weapons and limbs out of rat parts and office supplies, which is both gross and kind of impressive. But here's the thing. All this ingenuity is being used for the sole purpose of avoiding therapy. It's a perfect example of how Rick uses his genius to run away from his problems instead of facing them head-on. The absurdity of the situation really highlights Rick's emotional immaturity. Here's the smartest man in the universe, reduced to a pickle, fighting for his life against rats and Russian agents, all because he couldn't handle the idea of opening up in therapy. It's funny, sure, but it's also kind of sad when you think about it. Rick's willing to put himself through all this just to avoid dealing with his emotions. Now, let's talk about Dr. Wong's therapy session, because this is where things get really interesting. She sees right through Rick's BS and calls him out on his behavior. There's this great moment where she says, "You're a walking target for a never-ending sea of angry nerds that think getting in a fight with me is some kind of platform." This line perfectly captures Rick's self-destructive tendencies and his fear of vulnerability. He's so used to being the smartest person in the room that he can't handle someone actually understanding him. Rick's eventual return to human form and attendance at therapy is a small step, but it's significant. For once, we see Rick actually engaging with his family's emotional needs instead of just dismissing them. It's not a complete transformation. Rick is still Rick, after all, but it's a start. This episode marks a turning point in Rick's character arc, showing us that even someone as stubborn and set in their ways as Rick can potentially change. The Pickle Rick episode is fascinating because it reveals so much about Rick's deep-seated fears and his need for control. We see that beneath all the bravado and scientific genius, Rick is terrified of being vulnerable. He spent so long building up walls around himself that the idea of letting anyone in, even his own family, is scarier to him than being trapped in pickle form. Rick Sanchez, the brilliant and often callous scientist, isn't known for his emotional vulnerability. But in the episode The ABCs of Beth, we see a side of Rick that's rarely shown. This time, Rick faces a dilemma that challenges his usual detachment and forces him to confront his own shortcomings as a father. In a surprising turn of events, Rick offers Beth the option to clone herself. This isn't just another wacky sci-fi adventure. It's a pivotal moment that reveals the complexity of their relationship. The idea is that Beth could have a clone take her place on Earth while she explores the universe. It's a tempting offer that plays into Beth's long-held desires and insecurities. But here's where it gets interesting. Rick, who usually has an easy solution for everything, finds himself struggling with this decision. On one hand, he wants to give Beth the freedom she's always craved. It's a chance for her to escape the mundane life she feels trapped in and experience the wonders of the universe. But on the other hand, Rick is terrified of losing her. This internal conflict forces Rick to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself. He has to face the fact that he abandoned Beth during her childhood, leaving her with emotional scars that have shaped their entire relationship. It's a rare moment of self-reflection for Rick, who usually deflects any hint of emotional vulnerability with a sarcastic quip or an impromptu adventure. What's really fascinating about this situation is how it challenges Rick's usual need for control. Typically, Rick manipulates situations to his advantage, using his genius to stay one step ahead of everyone else. But in this case, he's willing to let Beth make her own choice. It's a significant step in Rick's character development, showing that he's capable of respecting others' autonomy, even when it terrifies him. The ambiguity surrounding Beth's decision adds another layer of complexity to their relationship. We're never explicitly told whether Beth chose to leave or stay, and this uncertainty mirrors the emotional turmoil both characters are experiencing. It's a clever narrative device that keeps us guessing and reflects the complicated nature of family relationships. This situation is particularly challenging for Rick because it strips away his usual certainty. Rick is accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, always confident in his ability to outsmart any problem. But when it comes to matters of the heart, especially involving his daughter, Rick finds himself in unfamiliar territory. He can't simply invent a gadget or hop to another dimension to solve this problem. We see Rick grappling with the consequences of his actions in a way we haven't seen before. He's forced to confront the impact his choices have had on his family, particularly Beth. It's a moment of reckoning for Rick, as he realizes that his genius and interdimensional adventures can't shield him from the emotional fallout of his decisions. This storyline represents a significant step in Rick's journey towards emotional maturity. It's not that Rick suddenly becomes a perfect father or a completely changed man, but we do see him making an effort to understand and respect Beth's needs, even when they conflict with his own desires. It's a small but important shift in Rick's character, showing that he's capable of growth and change. As the story unfolds, we see Rick struggling with his fear of abandonment. It's ironic considering he was the one who abandoned Beth in the first place. But now, faced with the possibility of Beth leaving, Rick has to confront his own vulnerability. It's a rare moment where we see the cracks in Rick's armor, revealing the deeply insecure person beneath the confident exterior. Just when we thought we'd seen Rick at his most vulnerable, the Vat of Acid episode throws us a curveball that makes us question everything we know about consequences in the multiverse. This episode takes Rick and Morty's interdimensional shenanigans to a whole new level, forcing them to confront the true weight of their actions across infinite realities. The episode kicks off with Rick creating what seems like a harmless device for Morty, a save point gadget that allows him to reload his life at will. At first glance, it looks like a cool toy, giving Morty the power to undo any mistake or relive any moment. We see Morty having a field day with this newfound ability, making reckless decisions and indulging in all sorts of wild behavior without any apparent consequences. He's living life like it's a video game, and why wouldn't he? After all, he can just hit the reset button whenever things go south. But as the story unfolds, we discover that there's more to Rick's device than meets the eye. In a shocking twist, it's revealed that every time Morty uses the device, it's not just rewinding time. It's creating and destroying entire alternate realities. Each save spawns a new universe, and each reload wipes out an entire world. Suddenly, Morty's carefree actions take on a whole new meaning. He's not just messing around with his own life, he's playing God with countless lives across the multiverse. This revelation hits both Rick and Morty like a ton of bricks. For Morty, it's a harsh lesson in the consequences of his actions. All those times he thought he was just having fun or fixing his mistakes, he was actually causing unimaginable destruction. It's a moment that forces Morty to grow up real fast, realizing that even in a multiverse of infinite possibilities, actions still have weight and meaning. But the episode isn't just about Morty's character development. It also gives us a fascinating glimpse into Rick's complex psyche. We learn that Rick's motivation for creating this elaborate scheme wasn't just to give Morty a cool toy, it was to teach him a lesson about respecting Rick's ideas. It's a classic Rick move, using his incredible scientific genius to set up an overly complicated plan just to prove a point. However, as the true nature of the device comes to light, we see Rick grappling with the ethical implications of his actions in a way we haven't seen before. This isn't just Rick being callous or indifferent to the consequences of his inventions. For once, we see him truly wrestling with the moral weight of what he's done. It's a significant moment in Rick's character development, showing us that beneath his cynical exterior, there's a growing awareness of the impact his actions have on others. The episode ends on a somber note, with both Rick and Morty feeling the heavy burden of guilt for their actions. It's a rare moment of genuine remorse for both characters, especially Rick, who usually brushes off the consequences of his schemes with a burp and a witty one-liner. This time, there's no easy escape, no dimension-hopping solution to erase what they've done. What makes the Vat of Acid episode so impactful is how it uses the show's established multiverse concept to explore deeper themes of responsibility and ethics. It's not just about the cool sci-fi concept of save points and alternate realities. It's about the moral implications of wielding that kind of power. The episode forces us to consider: if our actions create and destroy entire universes, what does that mean for our sense of right and wrong? This storyline marks a significant step in Rick's journey towards emotional maturity and ethical awareness. We've seen Rick do plenty of morally questionable things throughout the series, but this is one of the first times we really see him confront the consequences of his actions head-on. It's a turning point that suggests Rick might be capable of growth and change, despite his often nihilistic outlook. Just when we think we've got Rick figured out, he throws us for another loop. Picture this: a planet where all crime is legal for one night, Rick fully embracing the chaos, and then something happens that makes him risk it all. What could possibly make the most selfish man in the multiverse put his life on the line? The answer lies in the episode Look Who's Purging Now, where we see Rick face a situation that challenges his self-serving nature in ways we never imagined. Rick and Morty find themselves on a planet that's eerily similar to the setting of the Purge movie franchise. Once a year, this world descends into complete anarchy, with all crimes, including murder, becoming legal for one night. At first, Rick reacts exactly as we'd expect. He's not concerned about the locals or their plight. Instead, he sees this as an opportunity for some twisted entertainment. It's classic Rick behavior, treating the universe as his personal playground without a care for the consequences. As the Purge Night begins, we see Rick dive headfirst into the chaos. He's not just an observer, he's an active participant. This isn't surprising given what we know about Rick's darker tendencies. He's always been someone who walks the line between hero and villain, often crossing over to the dark side when it suits him. In this episode, we see that side of him in full force as he gleefully takes part in the mayhem. But then something unexpected happens. Morty finds himself in serious danger, and Rick's reaction is, well, not very Rick-like at all. Without a moment's hesitation, Rick springs into action to save his grandson. This isn't the calculated, self-serving Rick we're used to. This is Rick putting himself in harm's way for someone else's sake. It's a moment that makes us sit up and take notice because it's so out of character for the Rick we thought we knew. What follows is an intense sequence where Rick fights off numerous attackers to protect Morty. He's outnumbered and outgunned, but he doesn't back down. Rick puts himself at great risk, taking on waves of bloodthirsty purgers with nothing but his wits and whatever weapons he can cobble together. It's a display of heroism that we rarely see from Rick, and it's all the more impactful because of that. This moment of selflessness stands in stark contrast to Rick's usual behavior. We're used to seeing Rick look out for number one, often at the expense of others, including his own family. But here, we see a glimpse of something else: Rick's capacity for heroism and his growing attachment to Morty. It's a side of Rick that we've only seen hints of before, and it's fascinating to watch it come to the forefront in such a dramatic way. What's particularly interesting about this turn of events is how it reveals the deepening bond between Rick and Morty. Throughout the series, we've seen their relationship evolve, but it's often been a case of one step forward, two steps back. Rick frequently puts Morty in danger or uses him for his own ends. But in this moment, we see that despite all his cynicism and seeming indifference, Rick has grown to care deeply for his grandson. Rick's actions on the Purge planet reveal a capacity for self-sacrifice that we didn't know he had. It's a significant shift in his character, showing us that Rick is capable of prioritizing someone else's well-being over his own desires and safety. This isn't just about protecting an asset or a tool. This is Rick genuinely caring about what happens to Morty. Of course, this being Rick and Morty, the episode doesn't end with a group hug and declarations of familial love. Rick is still Rick after all. But this event marks a turning point in how we understand Rick's character. It shows us that beneath all the layers of cynicism, alcoholism, and seeming apathy, there's a part of Rick that's capable of profound care and selflessness. Just when we think we've got Rick figured out, the show throws us a curveball that completely reshapes our understanding of his character. In the episode Rest and Ricklaxation, Rick and Morty decide to take a break from their adventures and visit an alien spa. But this isn't your average day at the sauna. The spa offers a unique service that removes all toxic mental traits from a person. Of course, Rick being Rick, he can't resist the opportunity to tinker with his own psyche. The result? Rick splits into two distinct versions of himself: toxic Rick and healthy Rick. It's like looking at two sides of the same coin, but each side is a fully realized person. Toxic Rick embodies all of Rick's negative traits, the ones we've come to know so well throughout the series. He's the alcoholic, selfish, and cruel version of Rick that we've seen cause chaos across the multiverse. This toxic Rick is a walking, talking manifestation of all the parts of himself that Rick considers, well, toxic. But here's where it gets really interesting. Healthy Rick, while more considerate and stable, lacks the drive and genius that make Rick, well, Rick. It's a fascinating exploration of the idea that our flaws and our strengths might be more intertwined than we'd like to admit. The show is asking us to consider a pretty heavy question. Are the traits we consider negative actually an essential part of what makes us who we are? This separation forces Rick to confront the parts of himself he considers toxic in a very literal way. We see him struggling with the realization that these negative traits, as much as he might want to get rid of them, are integral to his identity. It's not just about acknowledging that he has flaws. It's about recognizing that those flaws might be inseparable from the parts of himself that he values. The episode dives deep into the complex nature of personality and the difficulty of true self-improvement. It's not as simple as just cutting out the bad parts and keeping the good. The show suggests that growth isn't about eliminating our flaws, but rather about integrating them into a more balanced whole. This idea is reinforced by some pretty powerful quotes from both versions of Rick. Toxic Rick says, "I'm not a monster, I'm just a guy who's been through some stuff." It's a moment of vulnerability from the part of Rick that's usually all bravado and cynicism. On the other hand, healthy Rick says, "I just want to be a better person." It's a simple statement, but it highlights the contrast between the two Ricks and the struggle at the heart of Rick's character. The creator of the show, Justin Roiland, has commented on the importance of showing how Rick's flaws are not just negative traits, but also part of what makes him a genius. It's a complex portrayal that adds layers to Rick's character, making him more than just a cynical scientist. We're seeing the inner workings of a deeply complicated individual. This episode serves as a turning point in how we understand Rick's character. It shows us that beneath all the layers of cynicism, alcoholism, and seeming apathy, there's a part of Rick that's capable of profound self-reflection. It's not that he's unaware of his flaws, it's that he's grappling with how integral they are to his identity. Moving forward, we'll see how this experience influences Rick's approach to self-improvement and relationships. It's not about becoming a perfect person, because the show argues that such a thing doesn't exist. Instead, it's about finding a way to integrate all aspects of oneself, the good and the bad, into a more balanced whole. Rick's journey through the multiverse has been filled with countless adventures, but few have shaken him to his core, like the death of his oldest friend, Bird Person. This event marks a significant turning point in Rick's emotional development, forcing him to confront the harsh realities of his chaotic lifestyle and its impact on those closest to him. We see Rick, usually so detached and cynical, experiencing genuine grief and anger over the loss of Bird Person, revealing a vulnerability that we've rarely glimpsed before. The circumstances surrounding Bird Person's death are particularly tragic. His wife Tammy, whom we've come to know over several episodes, is revealed to be a deep-cover agent. This betrayal not only cost Bird Person his life, but also serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in Rick's world. It's a moment that shatters Rick's carefully constructed emotional barriers, forcing him to confront the consequences of his actions and the collateral damage his adventures can cause. In the aftermath of Bird Person's death, we see a side of Rick that's both surprising and deeply human. His grief is palpable, his anger raw and unfiltered. This emotional outburst is a far cry from the aloof, seemingly uncaring Rick we've come to know. It's a moment that humanizes him, showing us that beneath his cynical exterior, Rick is capable of forming deep, lasting bonds. But Rick, being Rick, doesn't just accept Bird Person's death as a fait accompli. Instead, he embarks on a mission to resurrect his friend, showcasing not only his unparalleled scientific genius, but also the depth of his loyalty. This quest to bring Bird Person back to life is more than just another sci-fi adventure. It's a journey into Rick's past, forcing him to confront painful memories and long-buried regrets. The process of resurrecting Bird Person is far from straightforward. As Rick delves into the complexities of bringing his friend back to life, he's forced to navigate through a maze of shared experiences and forgotten moments. Each memory he encounters serves as a reflection of their friendship, highlighting the good times they've shared as well as the mistakes they've made. It's a bittersweet journey that reveals the true depth of their bond, while also forcing Rick to grapple with the weight of his past actions. Throughout this ordeal, we see Rick struggling with the realization that his choices have far-reaching consequences. The danger he routinely courts doesn't just affect him, it touches everyone in his orbit. This newfound awareness adds a layer of complexity to Rick's character, showing us a man who's beginning to understand the true cost of his lifestyle. When Bird Person is finally resurrected, the reunion isn't the simple happy ending one might expect. Instead, it adds new layers of complexity to their friendship. Bird Person, confused and disoriented by his resurrection, must come to terms with his new reality. Meanwhile, Rick faces the challenge of rebuilding their relationship in the wake of everything that's happened. It's a delicate balance, fraught with tension and unspoken words, that showcases the intricate nature of their bond. This entire experience serves as a powerful catalyst for Rick's character development. It forces him to confront his own mortality, the fragility of his relationships, and the impact his actions have on others. We see Rick, perhaps for the first time, truly grappling with the weight of his past and the consequences of his choices. It's a humbling experience for a man who's always prided himself on being above such mundane concerns. The death and resurrection of Bird Person reveal Rick's capacity for deep friendship and his willingness to confront past mistakes. It's a testament to the complexity of his character, showing us that even the most cynical and detached individuals are capable of profound emotional connections. This experience changes Rick in subtle but significant ways, influencing his approach to relationships and forcing him to reconsider his own past. Rick's decision to turn himself in to the Galactic Federation wasn't just a shocking cliffhanger. It was a pivotal moment that would change everything. We see Rick, the man who always has a plan, willingly walking into the arms of his enemies. This uncharacteristically selfless act was aimed at protecting his family from the consequences of his actions. It's a moment that really makes us stop and think about how far Rick has come. In prison, we see a different side of Rick. He's not in control anymore. He's at the mercy of his longtime enemies, and it's a stark reminder of just how vulnerable even the smartest man in the universe can be. But of course, this is Rick we're talking about. Even when he's locked up, his mind is working overtime. Rick's escape plan is nothing short of brilliant, showcasing his intelligence and resourcefulness. He's able to manipulate situations to his advantage, even while incarcerated, proving that you can take Rick out of his lab. But you can't take the genius out of Rick. But this escape isn't just about Rick showing off his smarts. It reveals something deeper about his character. We see Rick's deep-seated issues with authority and control bubbling to the surface. He's not just escaping prison. He's raging against a system that dared to think it could contain him. This is Rick at his most defiant, and it's both thrilling and a little scary to watch. The consequences of Rick's actions are far-reaching. We're not just talking about a simple prison break here. Rick goes all out, dismantling not just the Galactic Federation, but also the Council of Ricks. It's a massive shakeup of the power structures in the universe, and it forces Rick to confront the scale of his influence. He's not just affecting his immediate family anymore. His actions have consequences across the galaxy. When Rick returns to his family, things aren't as simple as a happy reunion. We see him struggling with vulnerability and attachment. He's just turned the universe upside down, but facing his family might be the hardest thing of all. It's a complicated homecoming that shows just how much Rick has changed and how much he still needs to grow. This whole prison escape saga reveals something really important about Rick's character development. We see his growing willingness to sacrifice for his family. Turning himself in was a huge step for someone who's usually all about self-preservation. But at the same time, we see that Rick is still grappling with his need for control. He might be willing to make sacrifices, but he's going to do it on his own terms. As we move forward, this experience is going to shape Rick's relationship with authority and his place in the universe. He's proven that he can take down entire galactic power structures, but what does that mean for him? Will he use that power responsibly, or will it just feed his ego? And how will his family react to this new, slightly more selfless but still wildly unpredictable Rick? The Citadel of Ricks isn't just a gathering place. It's a mirror reflecting the best and worst of Rick's potential across infinite realities. In the episode The Ricklantis Mix-Up, we're taken on a journey that challenges everything we thought we knew about Rick's nature and the consequences of his actions on a multiversal scale. This episode focuses on the Citadel of Ricks, a society made entirely of Ricks and Mortys from different dimensions. It's a fascinating look at what happens when you take Rick's genius, cynicism, and disregard for others and multiply it across an entire civilization. We see Ricks and Mortys living vastly different lives based on their circumstances, which really makes us question the idea of Rick's inherent nature. In the Citadel, we see Ricks working as factory workers, cops, and even politicians. There are Mortys trying to make it through school, joining the police force, and even running for office. It's wild to see how these different versions of our familiar characters adapt to their roles in this society. Some Ricks are content with their mundane jobs, while others scheme to climb the social ladder. Some Mortys are timid and easily manipulated, while others have become hardened and cynical. The episode does a great job of exploring themes of class struggle and political corruption within the Citadel. We see how the Rick's cynicism and disregard for others can create systemic problems when amplified across an entire society. There are Ricks in power who exploit other Ricks and Mortys, creating a clear divide between the haves and have-nots. It's a stark reminder that even in a society of super geniuses, the same social issues we face in our world can still exist. One of the most intriguing aspects of this episode is the introduction of Evil Morty. This character represents the darkest potential of Morty when influenced by Rick's worst traits. Evil Morty is cunning, manipulative, and willing to do whatever it takes to gain power. He's a significant threat to the established order of the Citadel and potentially the entire multiverse. The rise of Evil Morty serves as a commentary on the potential dangers of Rick's influence on Morty. It suggests that the cycle of abuse and manipulation we've seen between Rick and Morty can lead to some pretty dire consequences if taken to the extreme. It's a chilling reminder that even though Rick often treats Morty poorly, their relationship has a profound impact on Morty's development. Throughout the episode, we see the consequences of Rick's actions on a multiversal scale. The Citadel itself is a result of Rick's banding together for protection, but it's also created a whole new set of problems. We see how even the most intelligent and powerful individuals can create chaos and suffering when they disregard the well-being of others. It's a powerful illustration of how Rick's selfish actions can have far-reaching implications that extend beyond his immediate family. The narrative structure of the Ricklantis mix-up is pretty clever. It weaves together multiple storylines featuring different Ricks and Mortys, each showcasing a different aspect of their potential. We follow a rookie cop Morty, a group of Mortys trying to escape to the wishing portal, and a simple Rick working in a wafer factory. Each story adds another layer to our understanding of the complex web of relationships and power dynamics within the Citadel. This episode really makes us reconsider the nature of identity and the impact of choices made by individuals within a larger system. We see how small decisions can lead to vastly different outcomes for different versions of Rick and Morty. It's a reminder that our circumstances and experiences shape us just as much as our inherent nature. The Citadel of Ricks serves as a powerful tool for Rick's character development. It forces him to confront his own nature by seeing it reflected in countless other versions of himself. This experience challenges Rick's sense of uniqueness and superiority, as he's faced with the reality that there are infinite versions of himself, some of whom might be even smarter or more capable. While the Citadel forces Rick to confront infinite versions of himself, there's one version he can never face again: the Rick he was before losing Diane. This tragic loss is the cornerstone of Rick's character, shaping him into the cynical, emotionally distant genius we've come to know. Throughout the series, we get glimpses of Rick's past that slowly piece together the story of Diane and the profound impact her absence has had on his life. Rick's invention of interdimensional travel is a pivotal moment in his backstory. It's not just a scientific breakthrough, but a catalyst for the tragedy that would define him. In Rick's original reality, this invention led to the deaths of both Diane and Beth. This devastating loss explains so much about Rick's behavior and his approach to relationships. It's why he struggles to form close bonds, and why he often pushes people away. He's terrified of experiencing that kind of pain again. The pursuit of the Rick who killed his family becomes a driving force in Rick's life. This quest for vengeance gives us insight into the depths of Rick's pain and anger. It's not just about justice or revenge, it's about Rick trying to make sense of a senseless loss. This pursuit shapes Rick's interactions with the multiverse, influencing his decisions and often putting him in conflict with other versions of himself. We see how the loss of Diane has warped Rick's worldview. His cynicism and nihilism aren't just personality quirks, they're defense mechanisms. By convincing himself that nothing matters in an infinite multiverse, Rick tries to numb the pain of his loss. But this worldview comes at a cost, isolating him from those who care about him and fueling his self-destructive tendencies. Rick's complex relationship with Beth is another result of losing Diane. On one hand, Beth is a constant reminder of what Rick has lost. On the other, she's the last connection he has to Diane. This explains Rick's hot and cold approach to fatherhood. He desperately wants to connect with Beth, but is also terrified of losing her like he lost Diane. It's a push and pull that we see play out in their interactions throughout the series. As more details of Rick's past are revealed, we gain a deeper understanding of his actions and motivations. His reluctance to form attachments isn't just about being a jerk. It's a form of self-preservation. Every time Rick allows himself to care about someone, he's taking a risk. In a way, his adventures across the multiverse are a form of running away, always searching for something to fill the void left by Diane. The tragedy of Diane's loss is a significant aspect of Rick's character arc, influencing his cynical outlook and emotional detachment. It's not just about the past, it's an ongoing struggle for Rick. We see this play out in his interactions with his family, his approach to danger, and even in his relationship with alcohol. Rick's drinking isn't just a quirk, it's a coping mechanism for a pain he can never fully escape. Rick's emotional turmoil regarding Diane is further explored in later seasons, particularly in the season 7 finale. Here, Rick confronts his feelings about her loss in a way we haven't seen before. It's a powerful moment that shows how deeply Diane's absence continues to impact him, even after all this time and all his interdimensional adventures. Understanding Rick's backstory with Diane provides crucial context for his character. It explains his fear of vulnerability, his struggle with intimacy, and his often contradictory behavior. Rick's genius and his emotional struggles are two sides of the same coin, both stemming from this defining loss in his life. It's a reminder that even in a show as wild and imaginative as Rick and Morty, the characters are grounded in very real, very human experiences of loss and grief. Just when we think we've got Rick figured out, the Wedding Squanchers throws us a curveball. We're about to see a side of Rick that's so unexpected, it'll make you question everything you thought you knew about his character. This episode marks a major turning point in Rick's journey, showcasing a rare moment where he chooses his family over his own freedom. The episode kicks off with Bird Person's wedding, and surprisingly, we see Rick actually participating in this joyous occasion. It's a stark contrast to his usual detached demeanor, and it hints at a softer side of Rick that we don't often get to see. But of course, this is Rick and Morty, and things can't stay peaceful for long. In a shocking twist, the wedding turns out to be an elaborate trap set by the Galactic Federation. Suddenly, Rick and his family find themselves on the run, becoming intergalactic fugitives. This turn of events forces Rick to confront the harsh reality of how his lifestyle affects those around him. It's no longer just about Rick's wild adventures. Now, his entire family is caught in the crossfire. As they search for a new home, we see Rick grappling with the consequences of his actions in a way we've never seen before. The gravity of the situation weighs heavily on him, and for once, he can't just portal gun his way out of it. This is where we start to see cracks in Rick's usually impenetrable emotional armor. The real kicker comes when Rick makes a decision that goes against everything we thought we knew about him. In a moment that left fans stunned, Rick chooses to turn himself in to the Galactic Federation to ensure his family's safety. This self-sacrifice is a complete 180 from Rick's typically selfish behavior, and it's a moment that resonates deeply with viewers. We can see the internal struggle Rick faces when he says, "I can't let them hurt you, Morty." It's a rare moment of vulnerability from a character who usually hides behind layers of sarcasm and cynicism. This line isn't just about protecting Morty. It's about Rick finally acknowledging the depth of his feelings for his family. The emotional impact of Rick's decision is palpable, especially when we see Beth's reaction. The complex relationship between Rick and his daughter has been a recurring theme throughout the series, and this moment adds a new layer to their dynamic. Beth's visible distress at Rick's self-sacrifice speaks volumes about the love she still harbors for her father, despite their tumultuous history. What makes this episode so significant is how it challenges our perception of Rick. Up until this point, we've seen him as a self-serving, nihilistic genius who cares about little beyond his own pursuits. But The Wedding Squanchers shows us that there's more to Rick than meets the eye. It suggests that beneath all the cynicism and bravado, there's a man capable of deep love and sacrifice. This episode serves as a crucial pivot point in Rick's character arc. It's not just about a single act of selflessness. It's about Rick showing genuine growth and emotional maturity. By choosing his family over his freedom, Rick demonstrates that he's capable of change, even if it goes against his nature. The aftermath of Rick's decision sets the stage for future character development. How will this act of sacrifice impact Rick's relationship with his family moving forward? Will we see a softer side of Rick, or will he retreat further into his shell to protect himself from vulnerability? These questions add a new layer of complexity to Rick's character, making him more relatable and human than ever before. Fan reactions to this episode highlight its significance in Rick's overall character arc. Many viewers saw this as a defining moment for Rick, one that showcased his capacity for growth and change. Critics, too, have pointed out how effectively this episode illustrates the complexity of Rick's character, juxtaposing his selfish tendencies with moments of genuine care for his family. Just when we think we understand the depths of Rick's complex personality, Morty's mind-blowers throws us for a loop. This episode reveals a secret practice of Rick's that blurs the line between protection and manipulation, forcing us to reconsider the true nature of his care for Morty. We discover that Rick has been regularly erasing Morty's traumatic memories and storing them in a vault, a revelation that adds a whole new layer to their already complicated relationship. The episode takes us on a journey through Morty's erased memories, showcasing a wide range of experiences that Rick deemed too traumatic for Morty to handle. These memories aren't just embarrassing moments or awkward situations. They include deeply disturbing experiences that highlight the intense and often dangerous nature of their adventures. One particularly significant erased memory involves Morty accidentally causing the death of a group of people while trying to impress a girl, illustrating the immense weight of guilt that Rick has chosen to remove from Morty's conscience. As we delve deeper into these stored memories, we're forced to question Rick's motivations. On the surface, it might seem like Rick is protecting Morty from the psychological damage these traumatic experiences could cause. However, the episode raises serious ethical questions about the nature of this protection. Is Rick genuinely looking out for Morty's well-being, or is this memory erasure a form of manipulation and control? The complexity of Rick's actions becomes even more apparent when we learn that some of the erased memories involve Rick's own mistakes and moments of cruelty towards Morty. This revelation suggests that Rick's memory erasure isn't solely for Morty's benefit, but also serves to protect Rick from the consequences of his actions and maintain his position of authority in their relationship. It's a stark reminder of the power imbalance between Rick and Morty, and how easily Rick can shape Morty's perception of reality. As the episode progresses, we see both Rick and Morty struggling with the weight of these recovered memories. For Morty, it's a sudden flood of traumatic experiences that he was never given the chance to process or come to terms with. For Rick, it's a confrontation with the impact of his actions on Morty's psyche. The experience forces Rick to face the consequences of his decisions and the ethical implications of manipulating Morty's memories without his consent. This exploration of memory manipulation raises profound questions about the nature of identity and personal growth. By erasing Morty's traumatic memories, Rick is essentially altering Morty's life experiences and potentially stunting his emotional and psychological development. The episode makes us wonder, how much of who we are is shaped by our memories, even the painful ones? And what are the long-term consequences of removing these formative experiences? The climax of the episode brings a powerful realization for Morty. He comes to understand that Rick's memory erasure isn't just about protecting him from trauma, but also about controlling him. This moment of clarity adds a new dimension to their relationship, highlighting the often problematic nature of Rick's care for Morty. It's a care that comes with strings attached, a form of protection that also serves as a means of manipulation. Throughout the episode, we see Rick grappling with the impact of his decisions on Morty. While he may have initially justified the memory erasures as a form of protection, the consequences of his actions become increasingly clear. Rick is forced to confront the reality that his attempts to shield Morty from pain may have caused more harm than good, both to Morty's sense of self and to the trust between them. Now, if you thought Rick's relationship with Morty was complicated, wait until you see how he deals with Beth. The ABCs of Beth gives us a glimpse into a father-daughter dynamic that's equal parts genius and disaster. This episode takes us on a journey through Beth's childhood that might just change how you view their entire relationship. In this episode, we see Rick facing a challenge even he might not be prepared for. A daughter who's inherited all of his best and worst traits. Beth's intelligence and capacity for violence mirror Rick's own, and it's clear that the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. Rick's realization that he may have negatively influenced Beth's development is a pivotal moment in their relationship. One of the most striking revelations in this episode is Fruppyland, a dangerous fantasy world that Rick created as a playground for young Beth. This bizarre and potentially lethal dimension showcases both Rick's incredible creativity and his utter negligence as a parent. It's a perfect encapsulation of Rick's approach to fatherhood, brilliant but deeply flawed. As Beth explores Fruppyland and confronts the remnants of her childhood, we see her grappling with her own nature and her complicated relationship with Rick. The similarities between father and daughter become increasingly apparent, and it's clear that Beth has inherited not just Rick's intelligence, but also his capacity for ruthlessness and emotional detachment. The episode reaches its emotional climax when Rick offers Beth a choice that will change her life forever. He presents her with the option to explore the universe while a clone takes her place on Earth. This moment forces Rick to confront his own past actions, particularly his abandonment of Beth when she was young. It's a rare instance where we see Rick truly wrestling with the consequences of his choices and the impact they've had on his family. Rick's decision to give Beth this choice is significant in itself. It shows a level of respect for her autonomy that we haven't seen before, even if it's wrapped up in Rick's typically morally ambiguous packaging. This is Rick acknowledging that Beth is his equal in many ways, capable of making the same kind of life-altering decisions that he's made. The ambiguity surrounding Beth's decision adds another layer of complexity to their relationship. We're left wondering whether the Beth we see in subsequent episodes is the original or the clone, mirroring the uncertainty that Rick himself must feel. This uncertainty becomes a metaphor for the shifting nature of their relationship and the blurred lines between genuine connection and artificial facsimile. Throughout the episode, we see Rick grappling with his role as a father in a way we haven't before. He's forced to confront the reality that his influence on Beth hasn't always been positive. The dangerous nature of Fruppyland and Beth's comfort in that environment are stark reminders of how Rick's parenting has shaped her. This episode also sheds light on why Rick might have been so absent from Beth's life. Seeing so much of himself in her, both the brilliance and the capacity for destruction, might have been too much for Rick to handle. It's possible that his frequent dimension hopping and adventures with Morty have been, in part, a way to avoid confronting his complicated relationship with Beth. The creators of the show have emphasized that this episode is significant in exploring Rick's role as a father and the deep-seated issues in his relationship with Beth. It's a turning point that sets the stage for further character development, not just for Beth, but for Rick as well. We see him beginning to acknowledge the full weight of his influence and the responsibilities that come with it. Just when you think you've seen Rick at his most impressive, he pulls off something truly extraordinary. In The Rickdemption, we witness Rick turn a seemingly hopeless situation into his greatest triumph yet. This episode isn't just about Rick escaping from prison. It's a masterclass in manipulation that changes the face of the entire galaxy. Rick finds himself imprisoned by the Galactic Federation, who are desperate to extract the secret of interdimensional travel from his mind. But Rick isn't one to give up his secrets easily. Instead, he crafts an elaborate fake origin story to trick his captors. This fabricated backstory isn't just a clever ploy, it's a narrative device that allows us to explore Rick's psyche and the emotional scars left by his past, particularly regarding his family. As Rick spins his tale, we see him playing with the audience's expectations. We're all hungry for the truth about Rick's tragic past, and he knows it. He uses this desire against both his captors and the viewers, weaving a story that's just believable enough to keep everyone hooked. But Rick's true genius lies in how he uses this fake story as part of his grand escape plan. Rick's escape isn't just about breaking out of a cell. It's about orchestrating the downfall of both the Galactic Federation and the Council of Ricks. We see Rick's unparalleled intelligence and cunning as he manipulates these two powerful organizations against each other. It's a breathtaking display of foresight and strategic thinking that leaves us in awe of Rick's capabilities. The episode also gives us a deeper look into Rick's complex relationship with his own identity. As he crafts his fake origin story, we get glimpses of the real Rick peeking through. we see how his obsession with revenge against the Rick who killed his family drives much of his actions. This obsession is cleverly manipulated by the Galactic Federation as they attempt to control him, but Rick is always one step ahead. Rick's actions in this episode have far-reaching consequences that drastically change the status quo of the show. By bringing down both the Galactic Federation and the Council of Ricks, he reshapes the power dynamics of the entire universe. This sets the stage for future conflicts, particularly with Rick Prime, and opens up new possibilities for storytelling in the series. One of the most fascinating aspects of this episode is how it showcases Rick's ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. We see him turn a dire situation, being imprisoned and at the mercy of his enemies, into an opportunity to eliminate two major threats to his autonomy. This resourcefulness and strategic thinking are central to Rick's character, demonstrating the lengths he will go to protect his freedom. The episode's conclusion emphasizes Rick's complex relationship with his own identity. As he grapples with the implications of his past actions and the reality of his existence in a multiverse filled with alternate versions of himself, we see a Rick who is both supremely confident and deeply conflicted. This internal struggle adds layers of complexity to Rick's character, making him more relatable and human despite his extraordinary abilities. In the world of Rick and Morty, we've seen Rick Sanchez do some pretty wild things, but what if his most significant action was erasing his own existence? The Season 5 finale presents us with a Rick we've never seen before, one who's willing to sacrifice everything, even his own memories, for the sake of others. This moment is a game-changer for Rick's character, showing just how far he's come from the selfish, cynical scientist we first met. Throughout the series, we've watched Rick grapple with the consequences of his actions, but never quite like this. In the finale, Rick is forced to confront the harsh reality that his presence puts his loved ones in constant danger. It's a sobering realization for someone who's always acted like he's untouchable. We see Rick struggling with this weight, perfectly encapsulated in his words. How's it feel? Better? No, exactly the same. Yeah, it always does. This moment shows us that Rick is finally understanding that his actions have real consequences, and that achieving his goals doesn't always bring the satisfaction he expects. What makes this episode so powerful is Rick's decision to erase everyone's memories, including his own. This is a huge departure from Rick's usual modus operandi. We're used to seeing Rick use his genius to get out of sticky situations, often at the expense of others. But here he's using that same brilliance to protect his family, even if it means sacrificing his own identity. It's a selfless act that shows just how much Rick has grown throughout the series. The memory erasure isn't just a plot device, it's a metaphorical fresh start for Rick and his relationships. By wiping the slate clean, Rick is giving himself and his family a chance to rebuild without the baggage of his past mistakes. It's a powerful symbol of Rick's willingness to change and prioritize his family's well-being over his own desires. This moment is pivotal in Rick's character arc. We've seen glimpses of Rick's capacity for care and sacrifice before, but never on this scale. It's the culmination of all the small moments of growth we've witnessed throughout the series. From his adventures with Morty to his complex relationship with Beth, all of these experiences have led Rick to this point where he's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for his family. The creators of the show have emphasized the significance of this moment in Rick's overall character arc. It's not just about protecting his family. It reflects Rick's ongoing struggle with vulnerability and his desire to forge deeper connections. This decision shows that Rick is finally ready to confront his fears and insecurities, even if it means losing a part of himself in the process. The emotional weight of this scene is further amplified by the show's clever use of music. The Mazzy Star song from Rick Potion No. 9 plays during key moments, connecting this pivotal decision back to earlier episodes. This musical choice reinforces the themes of loss and the cyclical nature of Rick's struggles, paralleling Morty's earlier existential crisis with Rick's current dilemma. As we reflect on Rick's journey from cynical scientist to a more caring, if still deeply flawed individual, it's clear that this moment represents a significant milestone. Rick has come a long way from the selfish, alcoholic genius we first met. While he's still far from perfect, his willingness to sacrifice everything for his family shows that he's capable of genuine growth and change. As we continue our journey through the intricate world of Rick and Morty, we come to the heart of the show's dynamic duo, the Rickest Rick and the Mortiest Morty. These titles aren't just catchy phrases. They encapsulate the essence of our main characters and their unique place in the multiverse. When we first meet Rick and Morty in the pilot episode, their relationship is far from ideal. Rick, the brilliant but deeply flawed scientist, sees Morty as little more than a tool to be used for his own purposes. Morty, on the other hand, is dragged along on these wild adventures, often against his will. It's a rocky start, to say the least, but it sets the stage for the complex relationship that unfolds over the course of the series. As the show progresses, we start to see cracks in Rick's cold exterior. There are moments where his care for Morty shines through, like when he sacrifices himself to save Morty from the Galactic Federation in the Season 2 finale. It's a powerful moment that hints at the depth of Rick's feelings for his grandson, even if he's not always great at showing it. But just when we think we've got Rick figured out, the show throws us a curveball. We learn that Mortys aren't just hapless sidekicks. They're actually used as camouflage for Ricks to hide from the Galactic Federation. This revelation adds a new layer of complexity to their relationship. Is Rick's apparent affection for Morty genuine, or is it just another manipulation? This question becomes a central theme of the show, with Morty constantly questioning Rick's true motives. It's a relatable struggle that many of us face in our own relationships. How do we know when someone truly cares for us, especially when their actions are often contradictory? As the series progresses, we see a gradual shift in the power dynamic between Rick and Morty. Morty starts to assert himself more, challenging Rick's authority and making his own decisions. This growth is particularly evident in the episode Morty's Mind Blowers, where Morty refuses to erase his memories of their adventures. It's a significant moment that showcases Morty's growing independence and his willingness to stand up to Rick. But it's not just Morty who's evolving. Rick, too, begins to show more vulnerability as the series goes on. In the episode Autoerotic Assimilation, we see Rick get emotional over his breakup with Unity. It's a rare glimpse into Rick's softer side, revealing that beneath his cynical exterior, there's a person capable of deep feelings. The relationship between Rick and Morty reaches a turning point in the Rick Mirai Jack episode. Here, Rick finally reveals his backstory to Morty, providing context for his actions and motivations. This moment of honesty marks a significant shift in their dynamic, suggesting that Rick does indeed care for Morty, even if he struggles to express it in healthy ways. Throughout the series, we see Rick and Morty's relationship evolve from one of exploitation to one of mutual respect and care. It's a gradual process, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but it's ultimately a journey towards a more balanced and genuine connection. This evolution is reflected in the way Rick and Morty interact with each other. In earlier episodes, Rick's disdain for Morty is often palpable. He belittles Morty's intelligence, dismisses his concerns, and frequently puts him in dangerous situations without a second thought. But as the series progresses, we see Rick start to value Morty's input more. He begins to listen to Morty's ideas, even if he doesn't always agree with them. Morty, for his part, grows from a timid, easily manipulated sidekick into a more confident and assertive individual. He learns to navigate the bizarre and often terrifying multiverse that Rick introduces him to, developing his own moral compass along the way. This growth is crucial to the balance of their relationship, as it allows Morty to challenge Rick when necessary and prevent him from going too far off the deep end. One of the most interesting aspects of Rick and Morty's relationship is how it reflects the show's larger themes of nihilism and existentialism. Rick's cynical worldview often clashes with Morty's more optimistic outlook, creating a fascinating philosophical tension. As Morty is exposed to the vast, uncaring multiverse, he struggles to maintain his sense of purpose and morality. Rick, meanwhile, is forced to confront the possibility that his nihilistic attitude might not be the ultimate truth he thought it was. The concept of the Rickest Rick and the Mortiest Morty also plays into this theme. In a multiverse of infinite possibilities, what makes our Rick and Morty special? The show suggests that it's their ability to grow and change, to challenge each other and form a genuine bond despite their differences. This idea adds depth to their relationship, making it more than just a comedic pairing, but a central element of the show's philosophical exploration. As we've seen, Rick's relationship with Morty is far from perfect. It's filled with ups and downs, moments of genuine connection interspersed with betrayal and manipulation. But it's this complexity that makes their dynamic so compelling. We root for them to overcome their differences and form a healthier relationship, even as we're entertained by their dysfunctional adventures. While Rick and Morty's relationship is a roller coaster, there's another family dynamic that's even more complicated. What if the person Rick struggles to connect with most isn't his grandson, but his own daughter? Beth's relationship with her father is a tangled web of abandonment, longing, and scientific brilliance that shapes the entire Smith family. Beth Smith isn't just Rick's daughter. She's also a brilliant scientist in her own right. But her relationship with Rick is complicated to say the least. We see this complexity play out throughout the series in ways that are both heartwarming and heartbreaking. It's a dynamic that's central to the show's exploration of family and identity. We learn early on that Rick abandoned Beth and her mother when Beth was just a child, and this has had a huge impact on her life. It's shaped her personality, her choices, and even her career path as a horse surgeon, which we can interpret as a way for her to prove her worth to her absent father. Beth's abandonment issues are a recurring theme in the show, and they manifest in her constant need for Rick's approval. Beth is constantly seeking Rick's approval and validation. Even as an adult, we see this in episodes like The ABCs of Beth, where she asks Rick if she's evil. It's a moment that reveals just how much Beth values her father's opinion and how deeply his absence has affected her sense of self-worth. This need for validation often puts Beth in difficult situations as she tries to balance her desire for Rick's approval with her responsibilities as a mother and wife. Rick, on the other hand, seems to have a hard time showing affection for Beth. He often dismisses her or treats her like she's not as smart as him. This behavior is consistent with Rick's general attitude towards most people, but it's particularly painful to watch when directed at his own daughter. We see Rick struggle with expressing his emotions throughout the series, and his relationship with Beth is no exception. But we also see moments where Rick genuinely cares about Beth, like when he creates a clone of her so she can go on space adventures. This moment is particularly significant because it shows that Rick does want Beth to be happy and fulfilled, even if he has a hard time expressing it directly. It's a complex gesture that both acknowledges Beth's desire for adventure and Rick's own inability to fully commit to being present in her life. This creates an interesting dynamic, where Beth is torn between her love for her father and her resentment towards him for abandoning her. We see this conflict come to a head in the Season 3 finale, the Rick, Shuri, and Morty date, where Beth has to choose between staying with her family or going off on space adventures. This episode highlights Beth's internal struggle as she must decide between the stability of her family life and the allure of adventure with Rick. The choice Beth faces in this episode is emblematic of the larger struggle she faces throughout the series. She's constantly torn between her desire to be like Rick, adventurous, brilliant, and unattached, and her role as a mother and wife. It's a conflict that speaks to the show's larger themes of identity and self-discovery. Rick's relationship with Beth also affects his relationships with the rest of the family, especially Jerry, who he sees as beneath him. Rick's disdain for Jerry is often played for laughs, but it also has serious consequences for the family dynamic. We see how Rick's presence in the household creates tension between Beth and Jerry, and how it affects their children. Morty and Summer. The complexity of Rick and Beth's relationship is further explored in episodes that delve into Beth's childhood and the impact of Rick's absence. We see flashbacks and memories that reveal the depth of Beth's longing for her father and the ways in which his absence shaped her personality. These glimpses into the past help us understand why Beth is so eager to reconnect with Rick even when his presence causes problems in her life. One of the most interesting aspects of Rick and Beth's relationship is the way it evolves over the course of the series. As Beth becomes more aware of her own intelligence and capabilities, she begins to challenge Rick more directly. We see her grow more confident in her own abilities and less dependent on Rick's approval. This growth creates new tensions in their relationship, but also opens up possibilities for a more equal and honest connection between them. The show also explores the idea of nature versus nurture through Rick and Beth's relationship. We see that Beth has inherited her father's scientific genius, But we're left to wonder how much of her personality is a result of Rick's influence and how much is innate. This question becomes particularly relevant when we consider the possibility of Beth being a clone, as introduced in the episode, The ABCs of Beth the Clone. Storyline adds another layer of complexity to Rick and Beth's relationship. It raises questions about identity memory and the nature of family bonds. If Beth is a clone, does that change her relationship with Rick? Does it make her more or less his daughter? These are the kind of mind-bending questions that Rick and Morty excels at posing, and they add depth to an already complex family dynamic. Despite their complicated relationship, there are moments that reveal Rick's genuine care for Beth, such as when he creates a clone of her to allow her to experience adventures in space. This gesture, while morally ambiguous, shows that Rick does want Beth to be happy and fulfilled, even if he struggles to express it in more conventional ways. It's moments like these that keep us invested in their relationship, hoping that they'll find a way to connect despite their differences. Ultimately, Rick and Beth's relationship serves as a microcosm for many of the show's central themes. It explores the tension between genius and responsibility, between adventure and stability, and between love and independence. Through their interactions, we see how family bonds can be both a source of pain and a source of strength. And we're reminded that even the most brilliant minds struggle with the basic human need for connection and belonging. Jerry Smith, the eternal punching bag of the Smith family, is probably the last person Rick would choose to be part of his family. But here we are, and their relationship is nothing short of antagonistic. From the very beginning, we see Rick constantly belittling Jerry and treating him like he's not good enough for Beth. It's a dynamic that's established early on and continues throughout the series. Rick's disdain for Jerry is palpable in every interaction they have, and it's not hard to see why Rick values intelligence and capability above all else, and in his eyes, Jerry falls short in both departments. Jerry, on the other hand, is constantly trying to assert his authority as the man of the house. But he's no match for Rick's intelligence and sci-fi gadgets. We see this play out time and time again, with Jerry's attempts to stand up to Rick often ending in humiliation or disaster. It's a testament to Jerry's persistence that he keeps trying, despite the odds being stacked against him. Rick's treatment of Jerry reveals a lot about Rick's views on love and family. He sees Jerry as weak and believes that Beth could do better. This creates a constant source of tension in the family, especially between Beth and Jerry, as Beth often finds herself caught in the middle, having to choose between her father and her husband. But Jerry's character isn't just a one-dimensional punching bag for Rick's insults. As the series progresses, we see moments where Jerry shows unexpected depth and even bravery in the episode, The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy. We see a significant moment of growth for Jerry as he stands up to Rick in a way we haven't seen before during their adventure. Jerry finally calls Rick out for ruining his marriage. It's a moment that illustrates Jerry's growth as he begins to assert himself against Rick's dominance, revealing the complexities of their relationship. This moment is particularly powerful because it shows that Jerry isn't just a passive victim of Rick's abuse, but someone capable of standing up for himself and his family. The tension between Rick and Jerry comes to a head in the Season 3 premiere. The Rickshank Redemption. This episode culminates in a significant moment where Beth chooses Rick over Jerry, leading to their divorce. This decision highlights the impact of Rick's influence on the family dynamics and Jerry's position within the family. It's a turning point for the series, showcasing how Rick's presence can tear the family apart, and how Jerry often ends up as the casualty of Rick's schemes and Beth's desire for her father's approval. But Jerry's character arc isn't just about being Rick's punching bag. Throughout the series, we see moments of bravery and resourcefulness from Jerry, especially when it comes to protecting his family. In episodes like The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, Jerry manages to survive a dangerous adventure with Rick, demonstrating that he is capable of more than Rick often gives him credit for. These moments serve to add depth to Jerry's character, showing that while he may not be as intelligent or capable as Rick, he has his own strengths and virtues. Jerry's relationship with Rick also serves as a mirror, reflecting Rick's own insecurities and flaws. Rick's constant belittling of Jerry can be seen as a defense mechanism, a way for Rick to assert his own superiority and avoid confronting his own shortcomings. Rick's treatment of Jerry often stems from his belief that intelligence and capability are the most important traits a person can have. But Jerry's persistence and occasional moments of bravery challenge this worldview, showing that there's value in qualities that Rick often dismisses. The dynamic between Rick and Jerry also highlights the show's exploration of masculinity and fatherhood. Rick represents a hyper-intelligent but emotionally distant father figure, while Jerry embodies a more traditional but often ineffectual father role. Their conflict isn't just personal, it's a clash of ideologies about what it means to be a man and a father in the modern world. Rick's disdain for Jerry's more conventional approach to fatherhood reflects his own failures as a parent, and his inability to connect with his family in traditional ways. Jerry's relationship with Rick also serves to humanize the other characters, particularly Beth and the kids. We see how Beth's desire for her father's approval often comes at the expense of her relationship with Jerry, and how the children, particularly Morty, are often caught in the middle of this family conflict. Jerry's presence in the family provides a counterpoint to Rick's chaotic influence, offering a semblance of normalcy and stability, even if it's often portrayed as boring or inadequate as the series progresses. We see Jerry's character develop in interesting ways, despite being kicked out of the family. He manages to find his own path and even grows as a person. In some ways, his struggles outside the family unit serve to highlight how much of his identity was tied to his role as husband and father, and how he struggles to define himself without these roles. It's a journey that adds depth to his character and challenges the audience's perceptions of him. Jerry's relationship with Rick also serves to highlight the show's themes of existentialism and the search for meaning in a chaotic universe. Rick's nihilistic worldview often clashes with Jerry's more conventional outlook, and this conflict serves to explore deeper philosophical questions about the nature of existence and the value of human connections. Rick may see the universe as meaningless and chaotic, but Jerry's persistence in trying to find meaning and purpose in his life and relationships offers a counterpoint to this bleak worldview. Summer Smith starts off as your typical teenage girl in Rick and Morty, more interested in her social life and popularity than the wild sci-fi adventures her grandfather and brother embark on. She's often seen in the background of early episodes, rolling her eyes at Rick's antics or complaining about how weird her family is. But as the series progresses, we see a gradual shift in Summer's character. She becomes more curious about Rick's inventions and adventures, and starts to insert herself into the action. This shift begins to take shape in episodes like 60 Minutes, where Summer discovers she was an unplanned pregnancy and considers running away from home. It's a pivotal moment for her character as she grapples with her place in the family and starts to question her own identity. This episode marks the beginning of Summer's journey towards becoming a more active participant in the family's adventures, as Summer spends more time with Rick. We see her relationship with him grow. She starts to admire his intelligence and carefree attitude in the episode, "The Ricks Must Be Crazy." Summer tags, along with Rick and Morty, on an adventure inside Rick's car battery. She's fascinated by the miniature universe Rick has created and even helps him solve the problem at hand. This adventure showcases Summer's growing interest in Rick's scientific pursuits and her ability to keep up with his complex schemes. We also see Summer start to develop her own skills and confidence, often proving herself just as capable as Morty. In dangerous situations in the episode, Get Swifty, Summer takes charge when the Earth is threatened by giant alien heads. She rallies the town and even stands up to the president, showing a level of leadership and quick thinking that rivals her brothers. This newfound confidence becomes a recurring theme in Summer's character development. Summer becomes more involved in Rick's adventures. We see an interesting dynamic develop between her and Morty. They start to compete for Rick's attention and approval. This sibling rivalry adds a new layer to the family dynamic and pushes both characters to grow in unexpected ways. We see this play out in episodes like Morty's Mindblowers, where it's revealed that Summer has her own set of erased memories from adventures with Rick. This revelation puts her on equal footing with Morty in terms of their experiences with their grandfather. Summer's growth also affects her relationships with the rest of the family, especially her mother Beth. As Summer becomes more involved in Rick's world, she starts to see Beth in a new light. She begins to understand her mother's complicated relationship with Rick and the impact it's had on their family. This newfound understanding leads to some poignant moments between mother and daughter, adding depth to both characters. One of the most significant aspects of Summer's character development is how she becomes more confident and capable often rivaling Morty in her ability to handle Rick's adventures in the episode, The ABCs of Beth. We see Summer take charge during a dangerous situation on an alien planet. She demonstrates quick thinking and bravery, proving that she's just as adept at navigating Rick's chaotic universe as Morty is. This growth in Summer's character creates an interesting dynamic within the family as she becomes a more active participant in their adventures. Summer's evolution. From background character to adventure. Buddy also brings new perspectives to the show's exploration of family dynamics and identity. As she becomes more involved in Rick's world, Summer starts to question her own place in the universe and what she wants out of life. This introspection leads to some of the show's most thoughtful moments, as Summer grapples with the same existential questions that plague Rick and Morty. We also see Summer's growth reflected in her interactions with characters outside the family. In the episode Rickmancing the Stone, Summer forms a connection with the leader of a post-apocalyptic gang. She embraces the chaotic freedom of this new world, showcasing her adaptability and willingness to step outside her comfort zone. This episode also highlights how Summer's experiences with Rick have changed her outlook on life and her willingness to take risks. As Summer becomes more involved in the family's adventures, we see her relationship with Jerry evolve as well. Initially, Summer often sided with her mother in family disputes, but as she gains more perspective, she starts to show more empathy towards her father. This shift adds another layer to the complex family dynamics at play in the show and demonstrates Summer's growing maturity. Summer's character development also allows the show to explore different aspects of Rick's personality. We see moments where Rick shows genuine pride in Summer's abilities and even concern for her safety. These interactions reveal a softer side to Rick's character and highlight how his relationships with his grandchildren have changed him over time. In later seasons, we see Summer take on more central roles in the family's adventures. In the episode, The Vat of Acid. Summer is the one who comes up with the plan to save Morty, showcasing her problem-solving skills and quick thinking. This episode is a great example of how far Summer has come from her initial role as a background character. She's now an integral part of the team, often contributing ideas and solutions that even Rick finds impressive. Summer's growth also allows the show to explore themes of feminism and gender roles in sci-fi adventures in episodes like Prometheus. Summer calls out the sexist aspects of alien cultures and stands up for herself in male-dominated spaces. Her confidence and assertiveness in these situations provide a refreshing perspective and challenge some of the genre's traditional tropes as Summer becomes more involved in Rick's adventures. We also see her develop her own moral compass. She often questions the ethics of Rick's actions and isn't afraid to call him out when she thinks he's gone too far. This adds an interesting dynamic to their relationship and provides another perspective on the show's exploration of morality in a chaotic universe. The Smith family isn't your typical nuclear family by any stretch of the imagination. They're constantly dealing with interdimensional threats and Rick's crazy inventions, which puts a unique strain on their relationships. We see how Rick's presence has both fractured and strengthened their bonds throughout the series, creating a complex web of emotions and interactions that go far beyond the usual family drama. One of the most significant examples of how Rick's actions can have devastating consequences for the family comes in the episode Rick Potion Us 9. In this wild ride of an episode, Rick's reckless creation of a love potion for Morty spirals out of control, leading to a global catastrophe. The aftermath of this disaster forces Rick and Morty to abandon their original dimension, leaving behind their family in a world overrun by Cronenberg monsters. This moment really highlights how Rick's decisions can fracture the family's bonds and upend their entire existence in an instant. But it's not all doom and gloom for the Smiths. We also see moments where the family comes together to face threats, like in the Season 2 finale, The Wedding Squanchers. When the Galactic Federation invades Earth, the entire family has to go on the run together, showcasing their ability to unite in the face of adversity. These high-stakes situations often bring out the best in the Smiths, revealing an underlying strength in their family unit that persists despite the constant chaos. Rick's influence has made each member of the family more aware of the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, which both excites and terrifies them. This newfound knowledge adds an extra layer of complexity to their relationships and personal struggles. We see this play out in episodes like Rick's D-Minutes, where the family watches alternate versions of themselves on interdimensional cable. This experience forces them to confront paths not taken and question their own choices, leading to some pretty intense self-reflection and family tension. The family's dynamics are constantly shifting as they try to balance their normal lives with the craziness that Rick brings. This creates interesting conflicts and alliances within the family. For example, in Look Who's Purging Now, we see Morty and Summer team up against their parents, showcasing how the siblings' relationship has evolved as they navigate the bizarre situations Rick puts them in. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Smith family dynamic is how Rick's relationships with each family member contribute to the show's emotional core. Despite the chaos Rick brings, the family ultimately sticks together, even when faced with universe-ending threats or the consequences of Rick's latest invention gone wrong. Beth's relationship with Rick is particularly complex. As his daughter, she's constantly seeking his approval and validation, stemming from the years he was absent during her childhood. This need for Rick's acceptance often puts a strain on her relationship with Jerry and her role as a mother. We see Beth struggling with her own identity, torn between the life she's built and the adventures she could have had if she'd followed in Rick's footsteps. Jerry, on the other hand, represents the antithesis of everything Rick stands for. His simple nature and conventional outlook on life often clash with Rick's nihilistic worldview and scientific genius. This conflict between Rick and Jerry creates a constant source of tension within the family, forcing the other members to choose sides or try to maintain a delicate balance. Morty's relationship with Rick is perhaps the most central to the show. Starting as Rick's reluctant sidekick, Morty gradually grows more confident and assertive as he experiences the wonders and horrors of the multiverse. Their adventures together form the backbone of many episodes, exploring themes of morality, free will, and the nature of existence itself. Summer's role in the family has evolved significantly over the course of the series. Initially portrayed as a typical teenager more concerned with her social life than her family's sci-fi shenanigans, she's grown into an active participant in Rick's adventures. This has added a new dynamic to the family, as Summer and Morty sometimes compete for Rick's attention and approval. The show's creators have emphasized that these family dynamics are central to the series, using sci-fi elements to explore deeper emotional themes. This is evident in how Rick's relationships with each family member contribute to the show's emotional core. Whether it's Beth's desperate need for validation, Jerry's struggles with inadequacy, Morty's coming-of-age journey, or Summer's search for her place in the family, each character's growth and struggles are intricately tied to their relationship with Rick. Despite the often dire consequences of Rick's actions and the strain he puts on the family, there are moments of genuine care and connection. We see Rick making sacrifices for his family, even if he tries to hide his true feelings behind a veil of cynicism and indifference. These glimpses of Rick's softer side add depth to his character and show that, despite his flaws, he does care about his family in his own way. The Smith family's ability to stick together through interdimensional crises and domestic disputes alike speaks to the strength of their bonds. Even when they're at odds with each other, there's an underlying current of love and loyalty that keeps them together. This resilience in the face of cosmic chaos is what makes the Smith family so compelling and relatable, despite the outlandish situations they find themselves in. As we explore the Smith family dynamics, it becomes clear that the show's sci-fi concepts are deeply tied to the family's interpersonal relationships. The infinite possibilities of the multiverse serve as a backdrop for exploring very human emotions and struggles. Whether it's the fear of making the wrong choice, the desire for acceptance, or the struggle to find one's place in the world, or worlds, these universal themes are amplified by the show's sci-fi elements. The concept of infinite realities in Rick and Morty opens up a whole new dimension of family dynamics, quite literally. We're not just talking about one Smith family anymore, but an endless array of Smiths spread across the multiverse. This isn't just some cool sci-fi gimmick the show throws in for fun. It's a fundamental aspect of the series that allows the writers to explore the very nature of family relationships in ways we've never seen before. In the world of Rick and Morty, every decision creates a new reality. This means there are countless versions of Rick, Morty, Beth, Summer, and even Jerry out there, each living slightly or wildly different lives. We get our first real taste of this in episodes like Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, where we're introduced to a whole council of Ricks from different dimensions. It's mind-bending to see how each Rick can be so similar yet so different from our main Rick. But it's not just about seeing different versions of the characters. The multiverse concept raises some pretty heavy questions about the nature of family bonds. If there are infinite versions of your loved ones out there, does that make your relationships with them less special? It's a question that the show doesn't shy away from, and we see our main characters grappling with this idea throughout the series. One of the most poignant examples of this comes in The Rickshank Rickdemption. In this episode, Rick expresses a desire to return to a reality where he never left Beth. This moment is huge because it highlights the emotional weight that family connections carry, even across different realities. Rick, for all his cynicism and apparent detachment, still feels the pull of family ties. It's a reminder that no matter how many alternate versions of Beth might exist, the relationship between this particular Rick and this particular Beth still matters. The show's writers have actually talked about how the multiverse concept allows them to dig deeper into the characters' personalities and relationships. By showing us different versions of the Smiths, we get to see different aspects of their personalities played out. Maybe there's a reality where Jerry is a successful businessman, or one where Beth pursued her dreams of becoming a real surgeon. These alternate versions serve as a mirror for our main Smith family, highlighting both their strengths and their weaknesses. We see this play out in episodes like Edge of to Morty, Rick Die Rickpeat, where Morty gets a glimpse of potential futures. These what-if scenarios aren't just fun, alternate realities. They're a way for Morty, and us as viewers, to reflect on his choices and his relationships with his family members. It's like holding up a funhouse mirror to the Smith family we know, showing us distorted versions that somehow make us appreciate the original even more. The multiverse concept also allows the show to explore some pretty intense, emotional territory. In Morty's Mind Blowers, we see Morty experiencing memories from alternate versions of himself. This isn't just a cool sci-fi concept, it's a way for the show to dig into Morty's psyche and explore his fears, desires, and relationships with his family members. It's like therapy, but with more interdimensional travel and mind-erasing technology. But here's the real kicker. Despite all these infinite possibilities, our main Smith family still stands out. The more we see of alternate realities, the more we appreciate the unique bond that our main Rick, Morty, Beth, Summer, and Jerry share. Sure, they're dysfunctional as hell, but there's something special about their particular brand of chaos that sets them apart from their infinite counterparts. Think about it this way. In a universe where anything is possible, where you could theoretically find a perfect version of your family, the fact that our main characters stick together says a lot. They choose each other, flaws and all, over the infinite possibilities out there. That's pretty powerful stuff when you think about it. The multiverse concept also adds an interesting layer to the character's personal growth. When you can see alternate versions of yourself making different choices, it forces you to really examine your own decisions. We see this play out with characters like Morty, who grows more confident and assertive as the series progresses. Seeing other versions of himself might be contributing to this growth, pushing him to become the best version of himself across all realities. It's not just Morty either. Beth's journey of self-discovery takes on new meaning when you consider that there are infinite Beths out there. Her decision to stay with her family, or maybe to leave, we're still not sure if she's a clone or not, becomes even more significant when you realize she's choosing this specific reality over all others. Even Jerry, often the butt of the joke, gains some depth through the multiverse concept. Seeing alternate Jerrys who are more successful or confident highlights the potential within our Jerry. It makes his small victories and moments of growth all the more meaningful because we know he's capable of being more in other realities. The infinite realities also serve as a sort of safety net for the show's writers, allowing them to take big risks with storylines. They can explore dark or outlandish scenarios, knowing that there's always another reality where things turned out differently. This freedom lets them push the boundaries of storytelling and character development in ways that other shows simply can't. But here's the thing. Despite all these infinite possibilities, the show always comes back to our main Smith family. No matter how many alternate versions we see, no matter how many what-if scenarios are explored, it's the relationships between these specific versions of Rick, Morty, Beth, Summer, and Jerry that we're invested in. The multiverse doesn't diminish their bonds, it actually strengthens them by showing us just how special and unique their particular dynamic is. Morty's journey from sidekick to hero is one of the most fascinating character arcs in Rick and Morty. We see him start off as this timid kid who's constantly dragged into dangerous situations by his grandfather, Rick. But as the series goes on, Morty really comes into his own and starts to develop a sense of agency and independence. One of the earliest examples of this growth is in the episode Me Seeks and Destroy, where Morty actually stands up to Rick and insists on leading his own adventure. This is a huge moment for Morty because it's really the first time we see him assert himself and take control of his own destiny. Of course, things don't go exactly as planned, but it's a big step for Morty's character development. As the series progresses, we start to see Morty develop his own moral compass, and he's not afraid to challenge Rick when he thinks his grandfather is going too far. In Morty Night Run, for example, Morty stands up for what he believes is right, even when it puts him at odds with Rick. This is a recurring theme throughout the series, and it's really interesting to see how Morty's moral code develops and evolves over time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Morty's character growth is how he starts to become more Rick-like in some ways, while still maintaining his own unique identity. We see him start to use some of the skills and knowledge he's picked up from Rick, but he applies them in his own way, often with a more empathetic and morally grounded approach. This really comes to a head in the Vat of Acid episode, where Morty uses Rick's technology for his own purposes. In this episode, we see Morty take Rick's save-state device and use it to basically live out his own personal fantasies. It's a perfect example of how Morty has grown and learned from Rick, but is now applying that knowledge in his own way. The creators of Rick and Morty have actually talked about this aspect of Morty's character arc. They've said that Morty's journey is designed to reflect a path from dependency to independence, which we can really see playing out over the course of the series. It's not just about Morty becoming more capable or confident, it's about him finding his own place in the universe and figuring out who he wants to be. This growth in Morty's character also has a big impact on his relationships with the rest of the Smith family. We see him start to interact with Summer more as an equal, rather than just his annoying older sister. There are even moments where Morty and Summer team up or work together on adventures, which is a far cry from their early sibling rivalry. Morty's increasing assertiveness also changes the dynamic of his adventures with Rick. As Morty becomes more confident and capable, he starts to take more control and make more decisions during their interdimensional escapades. This leads to some really interesting situations where Morty's choices drive the action rather than just reacting to whatever crazy scheme Rick has cooked up. Of course, this newfound independence doesn't always work out perfectly for Morty. There are plenty of times where his decisions lead to disaster or where his overconfidence gets him into trouble. But that's part of what makes Morty's journey so compelling. He's not suddenly perfect or all-knowing, he's still learning and growing and making mistakes along the way. One of the most interesting aspects of Morty's character development is how it affects his relationship with Rick. As Morty becomes more independent and assertive, we see Rick start to treat him with a bit more respect. There are moments where Rick actually seems proud of Morty's growth, even if he'd never admit it out loud. At the same time, Morty's increasing capability sometimes puts him at odds with Rick. There are episodes where Morty's moral stance or his desire to do things his own way directly conflicts with what Rick wants. This creates a really interesting tension in their relationship as Morty tries to find a balance between learning from Rick and forging his own path. We also see Morty start to develop his own skills and interests outside of his adventures with Rick. He becomes more interested in science and technology, often using what he's learned from Rick in creative ways. This is another way that Morty starts to become more Rick-like while still maintaining his own identity. Morty's growth also has an impact on how he views the multiverse and his place in it. Early on, Morty is often overwhelmed or traumatized by the infinite possibilities and dangers of the multiverse. But as he grows and gains more experience, we see him start to navigate these complex concepts with more ease and even use them to his advantage at times. There's also an interesting aspect to Morty's character growth and how he deals with the darker aspects of his adventures. Early on, Morty is often shocked or horrified by the violence and chaos he encounters. But as the series progresses, we see him become more desensitized to these things, sometimes even participating in them. This raises some interesting questions about the long-term effects of Morty's experiences and how they're shaping him as a person. Despite all of this growth and change, Morty still maintains core aspects of his personality. He's still often the voice of reason or morality, in contrast to Rick's more cynical worldview. Morty's empathy and concern for others remain key parts of his character, even as he becomes more confident and capable. Beth Smith's journey from suburban mom to potential genius is a fascinating exploration of unfulfilled potential and the complexities of family dynamics. We see Beth struggling with her identity throughout the series, torn between her responsibilities as a mother and wife and her innate brilliance that mirrors her father's scientific prowess. This internal conflict becomes a driving force for her character development, shaping her relationships and decisions in unexpected ways. In the episode The ABCs of Beth, we get a deeper look into Beth's childhood and the violent tendencies she exhibited. This revelation adds layers to her character, suggesting that her genius might have a dark side if left unchecked. It's a chilling parallel to Rick's own destructive brilliance, raising questions about the nature of intelligence and its potential consequences when not properly channeled. Beth's relationship with Rick is at the heart of her inner turmoil. She shares his genius, but unlike Rick, she never got the chance to fully explore her potential. This creates a complex dynamic between father and daughter, where Beth constantly seeks Rick's approval while simultaneously resenting him for his absence during her formative years. We see this play out in various episodes, with Beth often trying to prove her worth to Rick through displays of intelligence or by supporting his outlandish schemes. The episode Pickle Rick provides a particularly poignant look at Beth's issues with her father. During a family therapy session, Beth's deep-seated emotional problems come to the surface. Her desperate need for Rick's approval and her inability to confront the damage his absence has caused become painfully clear. It's a raw and honest moment that highlights the emotional toll of being Rick Sanchez's daughter. Beth's genius also creates tension in her marriage to Jerry. She often feels intellectually superior to her husband, leading to conflicts and power struggles within their relationship. This dynamic comes to a head in the Season 3 premiere, where Beth chooses Rick over Jerry, resulting in their separation. It's a decision that showcases how Beth's internal struggle between her potential and her current life can have far-reaching consequences for her entire family. The show frequently uses Beth's character to explore themes of unfulfilled potential and the sacrifices often associated with parenthood. We see Beth grappling with the life she could have had if she had pursued her own ambitions instead of settling into the role of suburban mom. This internal conflict is beautifully illustrated in The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, where Beth struggles with her identity as a potential clone. The uncertainty about whether she's the real Beth or a perfect copy created by Rick adds another layer to her existential crisis, forcing her to question the authenticity of her experiences and relationships. As the series progresses, we see Beth slowly coming to terms with her genius and finding ways to express it within the confines of her current life. She begins to assert herself more, both in her family dynamics and in her professional life as a horse surgeon. This growth is reflected in her interactions with Rick, as she becomes more willing to challenge him and stand up for herself. Sarah Chalk, the voice actress for Beth, has provided valuable insights into her approach to portraying the character's complexities. Chalk emphasizes the importance of balancing Beth's intelligence with her vulnerability, noting that Beth's struggles are relatable to many viewers who feel torn between personal aspirations and family responsibilities. This nuanced portrayal helps to make Beth a more sympathetic and multidimensional character, despite her sometimes questionable decisions. When comparing Rick and Beth's genius, we see both similarities and stark differences. While they share a high level of intelligence and a capacity for scientific understanding, Beth possesses a stronger moral compass and a deeper attachment to her family. Unlike Rick, who often seems detached from emotional connections, Beth's brilliance is tempered by her desire to be a good mother and her struggle to reconcile her potential with her chosen path in life. Beth's journey also highlights the generational impact of genius within the Smith family. We see how Rick's intelligence and absence have shaped Beth, and in turn, how Beth's unfulfilled potential affects her relationships with her own children, Summer and Morty. This creates a complex web of family dynamics, where each generation grapples with the legacy of brilliance and the expectations it brings. As the series continues, Beth's character development becomes increasingly nuanced. We see her making efforts to balance her genius with her family life, finding creative outlets for her intelligence while still maintaining her role as a mother and wife. This evolution demonstrates that genius and suburban life aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but rather can coexist in a delicate balance. Beth's struggles also serve as a commentary on societal expectations placed on women, particularly mothers. The show raises questions about the sacrifices women often make for their families and the potential cost of suppressing one's true nature or ambitions. Through Beth, we see a poignant exploration of the challenges faced by individuals who feel they've compromised their dreams for the sake of others. Jerry Smith, the patriarch of the Smith family, often finds himself in a unique and challenging position. He's the everyman in a household filled with extraordinary individuals, constantly trying to keep up with the wild sci-fi adventures that have become a normal part of his family's life. Jerry's character serves as a grounding force in the show, representing the normal perspective in stark contrast to Rick's chaotic influence and the rest of the family's growing comfort with interdimensional escapades. We see Jerry's struggles play out in various episodes throughout the series, highlighting his insecurities and feelings of inadequacy. One particularly telling example is the episode M. Night Shyamalan Aliens, where Jerry unknowingly thrives in a simulated reality designed to keep him content. This episode brilliantly showcases Jerry's desire for a simpler life where he can feel competent and appreciated, something that often eludes him in his real life with Rick around. Jerry's relationship with Beth is frequently strained by his feelings of inadequacy, leading to conflicts within the family. We see this explored in depth in episodes like Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, where Jerry and Beth attend couples therapy. The therapy session reveals the deep-seated issues in their relationship, with Jerry feeling overshadowed by Rick's presence, and Beth struggling to balance her love for her father with her commitment to her husband. Despite being portrayed as the least capable member of the Smith family, Jerry often shows surprising moments of bravery and resourcefulness, especially when it comes to protecting his family. The episode The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy is a perfect example of this. In this adventure, Jerry manages to survive a dangerous situation alongside Rick, highlighting his potential to rise to the occasion when needed. This episode not only showcases Jerry's hidden strengths, but also provides a rare opportunity for him to bond with Rick, albeit under chaotic circumstances. Jerry's growth throughout the series is marked by moments where he asserts himself more, particularly in episodes where he stands up to Rick or takes initiative within the family. This development is crucial in showcasing how Jerry copes with living alongside Rick's eccentric behavior. While he may never match Rick's intelligence or Beth's potential genius, Jerry's journey is about finding his own worth and place within the family dynamic. Interestingly, Jerry's perceived incompetence sometimes leads to situations where he ends up being right or saving the day. These moments serve as a reminder that intelligence isn't everything, and that Jerry's more grounded perspective can be valuable in its own right. It's a clever way for the show to subvert expectations and remind viewers that even in a world of infinite possibilities, there's still value in the ordinary. Jerry's character also provides a lens through which we can examine the impact of Rick's presence on the family. While the other family members have largely adapted to the chaos Rick brings, Jerry often serves as a voice of reason or normalcy. His reactions to the bizarre situations they find themselves in mirror what a typical person might feel, providing a relatable anchor for the audience amidst the show's wild concepts. The dynamic between Jerry and Rick is particularly interesting to examine. Rick's constant belittling of Jerry and dismissal of his worth creates a tense atmosphere in the household. However, it also pushes Jerry to try and prove himself, leading to both comedic and sometimes surprisingly heartfelt moments. The conflict between these two characters represents a clash between different ideologies about masculinity, intelligence, and what it means to be a good father or grandfather. Jerry's struggles outside the family unit, particularly after his separation from Beth in Season 3, highlight how much of his identity was tied to being a husband and father. These experiences force Jerry to reevaluate his place in the world and find his own path, leading to personal growth and development. It's during this period that we see Jerry start to come into his own, making decisions and taking actions independent of the family's influence. The show's exploration of Jerry's character raises interesting questions about self-worth and how individuals find their place in a world that seems to value only certain types of intelligence or abilities. Jerry's journey serves as a counterpoint to the high-concept sci-fi elements of the show, reminding viewers that even in a universe of infinite possibilities, the struggles of everyday life and personal relationships remain relevant and important. As the series progresses, we see Jerry develop a more nuanced relationship with the rest of the family. His interactions with Morty and Summer, in particular, evolve as they begin to see him less as an incompetent father and more as a flawed but well-meaning individual trying his best in extraordinary circumstances. These moments of connection and understanding add depth to Jerry's character and to the family dynamic as a whole. Jerry's character also allows the show to explore themes of existentialism and the search for meaning in a chaotic universe. His more conventional outlook often clashes with Rick's nihilistic worldview, creating interesting philosophical discussions wrapped in the show's trademark humor. Through Jerry, the show asks whether there's value in striving for a normal, happy life in a universe where nothing seems to matter. Summer Smith's journey in Rick and Morty is a fascinating exploration of growth, identity, and finding one's place in a chaotic multiverse. While she initially appears as a typical teenage girl, more concerned with her social life than her family's sci-fi shenanigans, Summer quickly becomes an integral part of the show's wild adventures. Her evolution from background character to sci-fi adventurer is a wild ride that might surprise you, challenging our assumptions about what it means to grow up in a world where anything is possible. As Summer becomes more involved in Rick and Morty's adventures, we see her prove herself just as capable as her brother. She often holds her own against alien civilizations and cosmic threats, showcasing her quick thinking and adaptability. This transformation isn't just about Summer becoming more adventurous. It's about her discovering her own potential and carving out a unique role within the family dynamic. One of the most intriguing aspects of Summer's character development is her growing relationship with Rick. As she starts to admire his intelligence and carefree attitude, we see a bond forming that allows her to become more involved in his adventures. This creates an interesting dynamic, where Summer and Morty often compete for Rick's attention and approval, adding a new layer to their sibling relationship. Spencer Grammer, the voice actress for Summer, has shared some insights into her approach to voicing the character. In interviews, she emphasizes how Summer's evolution from a background character to an active participant in Rick's adventures reflects her own growth and confidence. This behind-the-scenes perspective adds depth to our understanding of Summer's journey, showing how the character's development is mirrored in the real-world process of bringing her to life. As Summer becomes more involved in the family's interdimensional escapades, we see her relationship with the rest of the family evolve as well. Her perspective on her mother, Beth, shifts as she gains a new understanding of Beth's complicated relationship with Rick. This adds another layer to the family dynamics, as Summer navigates her own place within this complex web of relationships. One of the most significant aspects of Summer's character arc is how it impacts Rick's own growth. As the series progresses, we see key moments that demonstrate Rick's development as a grandfather. He starts to include Summer more in his adventures, showing a level of trust and appreciation for her abilities that we don't see in the earlier episodes. This marks a significant shift in their relationship, revealing a softer side to Rick's character that we don't often get to see. In fact, there are moments where Rick shows genuine pride in Summer's abilities, and even concern for her safety. These instances are particularly noteworthy because they contrast sharply with Rick's usual cynical and detached demeanor. They offer a glimpse into the emotional core of a character who often tries to present himself as above such sentiments. Summer's growth throughout the series also challenges some of the traditional gender roles we often see in sci-fi adventures. She's not content to be a sidekick or a damsel in distress. Instead, she actively participates in the action, often coming up with creative solutions to the bizarre problems the family encounters. This aspect of her character adds an interesting layer to the show's commentary on gender and societal expectations. As Summer becomes more confident in her abilities and her place within the family's adventures, we see her develop her own moral compass. She begins to question the ethics of Rick's actions, adding depth to their relationship and the show's overall exploration of morality in a seemingly chaotic universe. This growth allows Summer to serve as a unique voice within the family, often providing a perspective that differs from both Rick's nihilism and Morty's idealism. Summer's journey isn't without its challenges, of course. Like the rest of the Smith family, she has to navigate the often dangerous and always unpredictable multiverse that Rick introduces them to. We see her grapple with existential questions, face life-threatening situations, and confront alternate versions of herself and her family. These experiences shape her character, contributing to her growth from a self-absorbed teenager to a more complex and nuanced individual. One particularly interesting aspect of Summer's character development is how it affects the show's exploration of family dynamics. As she becomes more involved in Rick's world, we see the balance of power within the family shift. Summer's increased capability and confidence allow her to stand up to Rick in ways that other family members often can't, adding another layer to the complex relationships at the heart of the show. Summer's evolution also provides an interesting contrast to Morty's journey. While both siblings grow and change throughout the series, their paths are distinctly different. Morty's arc often focuses on him becoming more jaded and cynical as he's exposed to the harsh realities of the multiverse. Summer, on the other hand, seems to become more confident and self-assured. This contrast adds depth to their sibling relationship and provides different lenses through which to view the show's themes. As we look at Summer's journey throughout the series, it's clear that her character serves as more than just comic relief or a foil for Rick and Morty's adventures. She represents the potential for growth and transformation in a universe where anything is possible. Her evolution challenges our expectations of what a typical teenage girl can achieve when thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The Smith family's adventures in Rick and Morty aren't just wild sci-fi escapades. They're a funhouse mirror reflecting the complexities of their relationships and the human experience. The show's writers have cleverly used the concept of the multiverse to explore deeper family dynamics in ways that resonate with viewers, making the sci-fi elements serve as metaphors for real-life family issues. Throughout the series, we see how Rick's presence has both endangered and empowered the family. His scientific genius opens up a world of infinite possibilities, but it also exposes them to constant threats from across the multiverse. This creates a unique dynamic where the Smiths have to balance their normal lives with the knowledge that infinite realities exist. The family's experiences with the multiverse often serve as mirrors for their own struggles with identity and belonging. In episodes where they encounter alternate versions of themselves, we see how these encounters force them to confront their own choices and relationships. It's not just about the sci-fi adventure, it's about self-reflection and growth. One of the most interesting aspects of the show is how it uses these cosmic concepts to explore very human emotions. When the family watches alternate versions of themselves on interdimensional cable, it's not just a fun sci-fi gimmick. It's a way for them to confront their own insecurities and unfulfilled desires. We see Beth grappling with her career choices, Summer questioning her place in the family, and Jerry facing his perceived inadequacies. The concept of infinite realities in the show also serves as a powerful metaphor for the choices we make in life. Every decision creates a new reality, leading to countless versions of the characters. This idea resonates with viewers because it reflects our own anxieties about the paths not taken in our lives. When Rick expresses a desire to return to a reality where he never left Beth, it's a poignant moment that speaks to real-world regrets and the desire to undo past mistakes. The show's exploration of the multiverse also allows for some fascinating character development. We see how the character's personal growth is influenced by seeing alternate versions of themselves making different choices. Morty, for example, becomes more confident and assertive as the series progresses, potentially due to encountering more capable versions of himself. This growth in turn affects his relationships with the rest of the family, creating a ripple effect of change. Beth's character arc is particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of the multiverse. Her decision to stay with her family gains extra significance when we consider that there are infinite Beths out there making different choices. It becomes a powerful statement about the value she places on her family despite the challenges they face. The multiverse concept also allows the show to take risks with storylines and explore darker themes. Because alternate realities exist, the writers can push boundaries and explore what-if scenarios without permanently altering the main characters. This creates a sense of unpredictability and excitement for viewers while still maintaining the core family dynamic that anchors the show. One of the most fascinating aspects of the show is how it uses the multiverse to comment on the nature of family itself. Despite the infinite possibilities and alternate realities, the specific versions of Rick, Morty, Beth, Summer, and Jerry that we follow remain central to the viewer's investment. This suggests that there's something unique and irreplaceable about the bonds between these particular versions of the characters, reinforcing the importance of family, even in a cosmos of infinite possibilities. The Smith family's adventures across dimensions aren't just wild sci-fi escapades, they're a clever way to explore the complexities of family relationships. When Rick and Morty abandon their original dimension after a global catastrophe, it's not just a plot device, it's a metaphor for how families sometimes have to leave behind their past and start anew. The guilt and trauma associated with this decision echo real-world family struggles with moving relocation or major life changes. The show also uses the multiverse to explore how external forces can strain family relationships. When the Galactic Federation invades Earth, forcing the entire Smith family to go on the run together, it's a sci-fi exaggeration of how real-world crises can either unite or divide families. We see the Smiths pulling together in the face of adversity, showcasing their underlying love and loyalty, despite their usual dysfunctional dynamics. Rick's influence on the family is particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of the multiverse. His presence has made each member of the family more aware of the infinite possibilities that exist, which both excites and terrifies them. This awareness serves as a metaphor for how knowledge and experience can change family dynamics, sometimes creating rifts, and other times bringing members closer together. The show's creators have emphasized that family dynamics are central to the series, and the multiverse concept allows them to explore these dynamics in unique ways. For example, when Morty experiences memories from alternate versions of himself in episodes like Morty's Mind Blowers, it's not just a fun sci-fi romp. It's a deep dive into Morty's psyche and his relationships with his family members. Summer's character development is particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of the multiverse. As she becomes more involved in Rick's adventures, we see her grow from a typical teenager into a capable and confident young woman. This growth is often catalyzed by her experiences with alternate realities, which challenge her perceptions of herself and her family. It's a sci-fi twist on the common coming-of-age story. The show also uses the multiverse to explore the concept of identity within a family unit. When Beth faces the possibility that she might be a clone, it raises profound questions about what makes us who we are. Is it our memories, our relationships, or something more intrinsic? This storyline serves as a metaphor for the ways in which our family roles can sometimes feel like performances or copies of expected behavior. Jerry's character arc is also significantly impacted by the family's multiversal adventures. His struggles to find his place in a family that regularly deals with cosmic threats serve as a metaphor for feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome that many people experience in their family roles. When Jerry thrives in a simulated reality, it's a commentary on how we sometimes create idealized versions of our family life. The show's use of the multiverse also allows for a unique exploration of generational dynamics. Rick's godlike ability to traverse realities contrasts sharply with the more grounded perspectives of Beth, Jerry, and the kids. This serves as a metaphor for generational gaps in families, where older members might have vastly different worldviews and experiences than younger ones. Rick Sanchez is a character who's constantly surprising us and himself. At the start of the series, we're introduced to this brilliant but deeply cynical scientist who seems to care about nothing but his own pursuits. He's the kind of guy who can casually destroy entire worlds without batting an eye. But as we journey deeper into the multiverse with Rick and his family, we start to see that there's more to this self-proclaimed nihilist than meets the eye. In the early episodes, Rick's attitude is pretty consistent. He's all about the science, the adventures, and maybe a drink or 10 along the way. He treats Morty like a human shield, using his brainwaves to mask his own genius from his enemies. It's easy to believe that Rick really doesn't care about anyone or anything beyond his own selfish interests. But as the series progresses, we start to see little cracks in Rick's carefully constructed emotional armor. One of the most interesting things about Rick's character development is how subtle it often is. The writers don't hit us over the head with big, dramatic moments of change. Instead, we get these small, almost throwaway moments that hint at a deeper emotional life beneath Rick's cynical exterior. Maybe it's a quick glance of concern when Morty's in danger, or a rare moment of vulnerability when he thinks no one's looking. But it's not just these little moments that reveal Rick's hidden depths. As the series goes on, we start to see Rick taking actions that seem to directly contradict his stated philosophy of not caring about anyone or anything. In The Rickshank Redemption, for example, Rick goes to some pretty extreme lengths to save his family from the Galactic Federation. Now, you could argue that he's just doing it to stick it to the Federation, but there's something about the intensity of his efforts that suggests there's more going on here. This creates an interesting tension in Rick's character. On one hand, we have his stated beliefs, his insistence that nothing matters, that caring is for suckers, that the universe is cold and uncaring. On the other hand, we have his actions, which often show a level of care and concern that goes well beyond what you'd expect from a true nihilist. It's this contradiction that makes Rick such a fascinating character to watch. Of course, Rick being Rick, he's not about to admit to any of this. He's got a reputation to maintain after all, but the show's creators, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, have been pretty clear about their intentions with Rick's character arc. In interviews, they've discussed how they designed Rick's development to explore themes of vulnerability and the impact of relationships. They've emphasized that despite his claims of not caring, Rick often goes to great lengths to protect and help his family. This tension between Rick's stated philosophy and his actions creates some of the most compelling moments in the series. We see Rick struggling with his own emotions, trying to maintain his cynical facade, even as his actions betray a deeper level of care and concern. It's a struggle that many of us can relate to the conflict between our desire to protect ourselves from emotional pain and our innate need for connection and meaning. One of the most interesting aspects of Rick's character development is how it's reflected in his relationships with his family, particularly Morty. In the early episodes, Rick treats Morty as little more than a tool, a means to an end. But as the series progresses, we see their relationship evolving into something deeper and more complex. Rick starts to show genuine concern for Morty's well-being, even if he'd never admit it out loud. This evolution is particularly evident in episodes like The Rickshank Redemption. Here, we see Rick going to extraordinary lengths to save his family, including Morty. It's a far cry from the Rick we met in the early episodes, who seemed perfectly willing to sacrifice Morty without a second thought. This shift suggests that Rick's relationships, particularly with Morty, are affecting him more than he's willing to admit. But it's not just Morty who brings out Rick's hidden depths. We see similar moments of vulnerability and care in Rick's interactions with Beth, Summer, and even Jerry, though Rick would probably rather die than admit to caring about Jerry. These relationships serve as a counterpoint to Rick's nihilistic worldview, challenging his belief that nothing matters and that caring is for suckers. Of course, this is still Rick we're talking about. He's not about to turn into a big softie overnight. His character development is more of a slow burn, with moments of growth often followed by backsliding into his old cynical ways. But that's what makes Rick's arc so compelling. It's not a straightforward journey from point A to point B, but a messy, complicated process that feels true to life. One of the most fascinating aspects of Rick's character is how his actions often contradict his words. He'll loudly proclaim that he doesn't care about anyone or anything, but then turn around and risk everything to save his family. He'll insist that love is just a chemical reaction, but then show genuine affection for his grandkids. It's this contradiction that makes Rick such a complex and intriguing character. The show's creators have done an excellent job of balancing Rick's growth with his fundamental character traits. He's still the brilliant, alcoholic, dimension-hopping scientist we met in the first episode. But as the series progresses, we see new layers to his character emerging. We see moments of vulnerability, flashes of genuine emotion that suggest there's more to Rick than just his cynical exterior. This gradual reveal of Rick's hidden depths is one of the most rewarding aspects of the show for longtime viewers. It's like peeling back layers of an onion, each layer revealing something new and unexpected about Rick's character. And because this development is so subtle and gradual, it feels earned. We're not asked to suddenly accept a completely different Rick, but to slowly recognize the complexity that was there all along. As we near the end of our exploration of Rick's character arc, it's worth considering what all of this means for the show as a whole. Rick and Morty has always been more than just a wacky sci-fi adventure series. At its core, it's a show about family, about relationships, and about finding meaning in a seemingly meaningless universe. Rick's journey from nihilism to, well, slightly less nihilism, is central to these themes. Rick and Morty is a show that's constantly surprising us with its depth. Sure, we've got the crazy sci-fi adventures and interdimensional hijinks, but beneath all that lies a beating heart that's exploring some pretty heavy themes. Let's peel back the layers of this cosmic onion and discover what's really at the core of Rick and Morty's multiverse. At its essence, Rick and Morty is a show about family and what it means to find your place in an infinite universe. We see this theme woven throughout each character's journey of self-discovery as they grapple with some pretty intense existential questions. I mean, imagine knowing there are infinite versions of yourself out there making different choices. Talk about an identity crisis. The show often uses its sci-fi concepts as metaphors for more relatable issues. Take the episode Total Recall, for example. We've got these alien parasites implanting false memories, which seems like a pretty wild concept at first. But when you think about it, it's actually a clever way of exploring how our relationships and memories shape who we are. It's like the show is asking us, what makes you, you? Is it your experiences, your connections to others, or is it something more? This theme of identity and belonging pops up again and again throughout the series. We see characters struggling to define themselves in a universe that seems to care very little about their existence. It's a pretty heavy concept, but the show manages to balance it with moments of genuine connection and love. Remember the episode Rick Potion number 9? That's where Rick and Morty essentially destroy their entire reality and have to bail to a new dimension. Talk about an existential gut punch. It forces the characters and us as viewers to confront the potential meaninglessness of their existence in an infinite multiverse. If there are infinite realities, does anything we do really matter? But here's where Rick and Morty gets really interesting. Despite all the nihilism and cosmic horror, the show ultimately suggests that our connections with others are what give life meaning. We see this play out in episodes like The Rickshank Rickdemption, where the family comes together to save Rick. Even in the face of an uncaring universe, these small moments of love and connection within the Smith family shine through. This creates a beautiful contrast that's at the heart of the show. On one hand, we've got the vast, uncaring universe full of infinite possibilities and potential meaninglessness. On the other, we've got this dysfunctional family trying their best to stick together and find meaning in their relationships with each other. Let's talk about how the show uses its sci-fi elements to explore these themes. Rick's portal gun isn't just a cool gadget that lets them go on wacky adventures. It's a metaphor for the infinite possibilities life presents us with. Every time Rick and Morty step through a portal, they're essentially making a choice that creates a new reality. It's like the show is constantly asking, what if? This concept of infinite realities serves as a mirror for the characters' internal struggles. Beth, for example, has to confront the paths not taken in her life. Summer grapples with questions of identity and self-worth when faced with alternate versions of herself. And Morty? Well, Morty's entire journey is about finding his place in this vast multiverse and figuring out who he wants to be. Even Jerry, often the butt of the joke, serves an important purpose in exploring these themes. His struggles with inadequacy and imposter syndrome are amplified by the family's multiversal adventures. In a world where anything is possible, Jerry often feels like he doesn't measure up. But his grounded perspective also serves as a counterpoint to Rick's cosmic nihilism. Speaking of Rick, his character arc is particularly interesting when viewed through this lens. On the surface, Rick presents himself as this brilliant but deeply cynical scientist who claims not to care about anyone. But as the series progresses, we see cracks in that facade. Despite his proclamations of not caring, Rick often goes to extreme lengths to protect his family. This contradiction between Rick's stated philosophy and his actions is at the heart of his character development. It's like the show is asking us to consider whether true nihilism is even possible when we form connections with others. Can you really believe nothing matters when you love your family? The emotional core of Rick and Morty is revealed through these relationships. We see how Rick's connections with Morty, Beth, Summer, and even Jerry give weight and meaning to all the sci-fi concepts the show throws at us. Without this emotional grounding, the show would just be a series of cool ideas without any real impact. By understanding Rick's relationships and how they shape the narrative, we gain a deeper appreciation for the show's lore. Every interdimensional adventure, every scientific breakthrough, every cosmic threat, they all matter because of how they affect this family unit. The Smith family's resilience in the face of cosmic chaos highlights their underlying love and loyalty, even when they're driving each other crazy. This focus on family and relationships allows Rick and Morty to tackle some pretty heavy philosophical questions in a way that feels relatable. We might not be hopping between dimensions, but we can all understand the struggle of trying to find our place in the world and maintain meaningful connections with others. As we near the end of our relaxing journey through Rick and Morty lore, it's worth reflecting on how the show uses its sci-fi trappings to explore very human struggles. The infinite possibilities of the multiverse serve as a backdrop for exploring emotions and relationships that are deeply familiar to all of us. It's this blend of the cosmic and the personal that makes Rick and Morty resonate with so many viewers. Rick and Morty isn't just a show about wild sci-fi adventures. It's a deep dive into family dynamics and finding meaning in an infinite universe. We see this through the complex relationships between Rick, Morty, Beth, Jerry, and Summer. These characters aren't just there for laughs. They're fully fleshed out. Individuals dealing with real issues and emotions. The show uses its sci-fi concepts to explore very human problems. We see Beth struggling with her identity and self-worth, Summer grappling with her place in the family, and Morty trying to figure out who he is in the face of infinite possibilities. Jerry's character even serves as a commentary on feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome. What really makes Rick and Morty special are those small moments of connection and vulnerability between the characters. They're often subtle, but they add a layer of emotional depth that sets the show apart from other animated series. So the next time you're watching, pay attention to those quieter moments. They're what give the show its heart and make it truly memorable.